A once cleared sky. The 5-year-old Izuku Midoriya sat in a chair at the doctor's office, eagerly waiting beside his mother for the results of Izuku's quirk test. Izuku was playing with his All Might action figure while his mother looked rather happy that her son had the admirable dream of becoming a hero. Izuku turned to his mother with a mix of hesitating and questioning look on his face. "Mom, do you think I will get an amazing quirk like Kacchan and All Might?" he said, clutching the toy close to his chest. "I'm sure you will," Inko said happily that Izuku was going to achieve his big dream. The door opened and the doctor, sporting a thick orange mustache, round glasses with dark green lenses, and a bald head entered the room with his face looking somewhat troubled. Inko took a note of this and thought of the worst. She didn't want Izuku's dream of becoming a hero to be crushed at such a young age. The doctor sat down on his chair unprofessionally and scratched his chin in deep thought. Well, young Izuku surely has a quirk, but to say it's confusing to find out what type and what it is would be an understatement. Both Midoriyas visibly relaxed. While one was excited, the other was worried. While Inko was relieved that Izuku had a quirk and his dream wouldn't be shattered, she was still worried about what the doctor meant with his statement. "What do you mean drive? Tsubasa? Is his quirk a mutation?" While rare, mutation arising in quirks wasn't anything to brag about, Inko thought as the doctor now had her full attention. "Well, how should I say this? When we checked Izuku's quirk factor, we found that his quirk is surely a mutation. We also found that his quirk factor showed an amalgamation of 2 strands. To put it simply, there is a slight possibility that he might end up being a dual quirk user. But that's when the tricky part comes in. While biologically, he is your son, but both of his quirks are neither like yours nor your husband's, so with the current technology there isn't a way we can tell what they will be," Dr. Tsubasa said, shocking Inko. Izuku, on the other hand, had a giant smile on his face that can give All Might a run for his money. "I can be like All Might." Izuku cheered as he ran around the doctor's office. Inko was laughing at her son's antics while the doctor looked happy too. "Thank you very much, doctor. Come on, Izuku, let's go home, we can make katsudon." They were both happy and satisfied when they went home, with Izuku's constant muttering about the possibilities of his quirk or quirks. Needless to say, it was one of the best memories of Izuku's life yet. Izuku arrived at the playground the next day to see Bakugo and the others playing. He ran over to them, excited to tell Bakugo about his quirk. "Kacchan." Bakugo looked in the direction of the voice and grinned. "I went to the quirk doctor's office yesterday, guess what? I have a quirk." Bakugo looked at him and smirked. "Whatever, Deku, it doesn't matter what quirk you end up with, you'll never be able to beat me. You probably have a useless quirk like yourself, eh Deku?" Bakugo said, laughing at the greenette as his goons soon followed. "Why do you have to be so mean, Kacchan? I'm just telling you the truth. So Deku, what quirk did your Sari end up with?" Bakugo said, taunting Izuku. "The doctor said it was a mutation, so it was hard to tell unless it showed any signs," Izuku said, looking down. "You can't do anything right. Not even getting your own quirk to show up. Pathetic," he nonchalantly said, while his goons laughed at the sight of Izuku's torn self of being bullied. Izuku started running away when he suddenly tripped and fell, gaining a slight cut on his right hand. While he was picking himself up, he could hear the constant laughter in the background when suddenly he started to glow green. "Hey, Deku is glowing," the winged one said, pointing towards Izuku. As soon as Izuku focused on the fact that he was glowing, the light he was emitting disappeared. "You see, that was your useless quirk, Deku," Bakugo mocked. Izuku, finding the need to defend his awakened quirk, he rebuked, "No. It's not useless, you wait until my quirk shows its full potential," he said as he ran away, saddened that his friends were so mean towards him. When he was at a safe distance from Bakugo and his goons, he checked upon his injuries, not wanting to come home injured, so that his mother wouldn't worry for him. What he saw baffled him. There was no cut. He briefly remembered the part where he glowed. "Wow. I have a healing quirk." As the realization hit him, he sprinted back to his home as fast as possible. "Mom, my quirk showed up. Mom, my quirk showed up," he loudly chanted as he entered his apartment. When Inko's ears caught what Izuku was saying, she rushed out from the kitchen and hugged him tightly. "Oh dear, really? Well, don't keep me waiting, what is it?" she asked eagerly, waiting for him to reply. "I have a healing quirk. When I was at the park, I tripped and fell, then I cut my hand and it healed," Izuku said all in one breath. Point 1. Point 2. Point 3. You what? Are you hurt? You aren't bleeding, are you? Which hand? How did you fall? How do you feel? Did someone trip you? Was it Katsuki? Wait, let me call an ambulance, Inko continuously muttered, showing the true nature of the Midoriyas. Oh, so that's where I get it. So cool, Izuku thought, happy that he inherited something from her. No mom, I'm fine, look. No bleeding, not even a scar. That is what I was telling you when I fell, I glowed green mom. And then my hand healed. Isn't that awesome mom? I can save so many people with my quirk, just like All Might. Izuku excitedly explained to his mother, who was still worried. Calming herself, Inko caught up to her son's explanation. She smiled and hugged him again. I am so happy for you, Izuku. I know you will do great things and make me a proud mother. After hearing this, Izuku was almost on the verge of crying. Thank you, mom. I will. After this event, they had their dinner as Inko assured her son that they will go to Dr. Tsubasa tomorrow to find out the extent and details of Izuku's newfound quirk. As dinner ended, Inko tucked Izuku in his bed. She slowly whispered, I love you, Izuku. Good night, my sweet boy, she whispered as she kissed his forehead. Leaving his room, she needed much sleep for such a stressful day, to her standards that is. Who knew those were her last words she ever said to Izuku, one that he will remember. Shota Aizawa, or better known as Eraserhead, was patrolling the streets in the dark night, the perfect time to operate for an underground hero like him. As he ran, jumping from buildings to buildings, he was suddenly startled with a ballistic sound of what sounded like a lightning strike. The weather was fine just now, better check out, just in case. As this thought crossed his mind, two more of the same ear-piercing sounds were heard. Okay, those definitely were not normal. He quickly bolted towards the screams that replaced the lightning sounds. Aizawa sprinted towards the now louder screams. Reaching the street, he saw the absolutely demolished house and people gathered around, some shouting for help, others calling, while some took pictures. He ran through the crowd and shouted, "Stay back, or you might get hurt." Many people scrambled to get distance while many calmed after seeing a hero arrive at the scene. Quickly running inside the half apartment, which was fully burned. After quickly looking around for any danger, he saw a body on the floor. It looked as if it had been electrocuted or burned. Must be some kind of villain. Looks like no one survived. Better call the police, Aizawa thought as he began to walk out, but then heard a muffled voice. He immediately turned around and saw a tuft of green and black hair hiding behind a sofa. The underground hero carefully walked to what might be the only survivor and saw a small child, probably around 4 years old, crying. When the kid saw him, and he became terrified as he jerked back with more tears falling. "PP, please stay away. DD, don't come near me," he panicked. "I am a pro hero, I won't hurt you," Aizawa replied as the child's eyes widened. "RR, really?" Aizawa nodded and said with a smile that none of his colleagues would ever see, "Come on kid, I am here to save you. My name is Shota Aizawa, underground pro hero, Eraserhead. I am Izuku Midoriya." Izuku stuttered as he hesitantly walked over to Aizawa. He assured the boy that he would be safe once out of the apartment. After sitting out with the now arrived medics, the police arrived with media and the local pro heroes. The fire was put out and the body was taken away. Izuku did not leave Aizawa's side and just hugged him tightly whenever someone approached the two. Eventually, questionings were done and Izuku never told what happened. Whenever someone asked, he just cried, and after hearing the news of his mother's death, he had a panic attack and fainted. Detective Tsukauchi called Aizawa and simply said, "Aizawa, you should take the child with you." Quote. "What? I can't take the kid. You know my living conditions. That environment is not for a child, and I also have work as a hero," Aizawa argued. "Yes, I am aware," Tsukauchi sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose as he continued, "but you know, the kid is shaken up and it seems like he trusts you enough for now. So what I am saying is keep him for some time, until the case is solved, then we will put him up to foster system or a living relative willing to adopt him." Aizawa sighed. "All right." He took Izuku to his home, laid him down on his bed as he was still passed out from the last panic attack. After tucking the kid into bed, Aizawa took a blanket and set himself on the couch in the living room. Extremely exhausted with the turn of events, he immediately fell asleep. It was midnight when Aizawa awoke to hear screaming coming from his room. Quickly opening the door, he found Izuku shivering and crying in his sleep, obviously having a nightmare. He cursed inwardly as he shook the boy. Izuku woke up panting heavily as he jumped and hugged Aizawa, startling him as he cried uncontrollably and said in a shaky voice, Mr. Aizawa I. Can, YUSSS state please. Aizawa sighed and nodded. The boy calmed down and slept, his head on Aizawa's lap as he unconsciously patted the boy's head, probably from being with cats too much. It's been 3 weeks, and the same aforementioned events transpired every following night. Aizawa might not show it, but he has grown attached to the kid after he got out of his shell. He was also grateful that Izuku was not like other whiny or annoying kids. In his short span of living with him, he found that whenever the subject of his quirk comes up, the kid tensed up, unusually stiff. He did not talk about it, so Aizawa decided to not pressure the boy. Because of this, the police had no luck with the case. One morning after having breakfast, Aizawa was sitting on the couch, watching the news, when suddenly Izuku was standing beside him, with a look he couldn't quite place. Mr. Aizawa, can I sit in your lap? I wanted to tell you something. Aizawa nodded as Izuku sat in his lap and took a deep breath. It was me. Aizawa was confused. He thought that the kid would finally tell something about the other night. Still, he motioned him to go on. I did that. I caused that lightning. KKK killed my mom. Aizawa was stunned, while the kid broke down even further than he had ever seen. He still kept his composure. Aizawa comforted Izuku, for him to calm down. After a little while, Aizawa noticed the kid was ready to answer some questions. He finally asked, "What is your quirk, kid?" Izuku was certainly afraid that if he told the truth he would be taken away, but seeing the comforting look on Aizawa's face, he mustered up the courage. Izuku ripped the bandage off. I think I could control the sky. Just know I'll be here. After the explanation by Izuku, of the events that transpired 3 weeks prior to the present day, Aizawa wasn't even sure what he should be feeling. So let me know if I got this right. The quirk doctor you and your mom visited, told you that you have a possibility of having 2 quirks, both mutations and none like your parents' quirks. And then the next day in the park, you fell and found your injuries completely healed after the glow, so you came to the revelation that you have a type of healing or regeneration quirk. Izuku nodded and waited for Aizawa to go on. Then the same night you awoke to feeling of a strange aura around you, that you haven't felt before, and saw purple lights and sparks dancing around your whole body. Why yeah. Shocked from the sudden surge of power, you accidentally flicked your finger and 3 concentrated lightning bolts struck your home, demolishing it and resulting in the passing of your mother, but you were unscathed. Aizawa hoped that this was all some caffeine-induced vision as Izuku nodded again, afraid of his answer. Please don't leave me, Mr. Aizawa, Izuku said in between muffled cries, clenching his fists and burying his face into the man's chest. Shota took a second to regain his composure and after comforting the kid, he said in a low voice, "Hey, it's alright, I am not going to leave you for something you couldn't control, it's gonna be alright." After some time, Aizawa found Izuku visibly relaxed in his arms. "Okay kid, it seems that you have an incredible uncontrollable quirk, and judging by your reaction, you haven't gotten your quirk counseling yet." Izuku simply nodded in wonder. "So, what I want you to do is change your clothes. We will go to UA and get those things done, as well as get a needed medical evaluation, alright?" Izuku understood what he said and took a moment to register the statement. Wait, the UA Hero School. That's where All Might graduated. So cool. Aizawa was stunned as he watched a complete 180 in the boy but was glad that the kid didn't let himself drown in a memory he wouldn't want to have. Izuku and Aizawa were standing outside the gates of UA High School. This never fails to amaze me. Even after all this time, Aizawa thought, reminiscing his young days as a hero in training. They walked through the lively halls of the school. It all poured like godly energy in Izuku's eyes, who was practically glittering at the sight like it was a showcase, until they finally reached a huge door that said, Principal Nedzu. "Okay kid, here we are. Now then, if all the years I studied here told me anything, the principal can come off as a little scary, but he means well," Aizawa said as he rubbed his temples, clearly not wanting to see the rat again. "Whoa Mr. Aizawa. You were a UA student too?" Izuku asked, practically beaming at the fact that he was in UA and with a hero that graduated from this institution no less. The tired hero had to cover his eyes from the bright light the kid was giving off. "Yeah kid, now come on, let's go," Aizawa said, opening the door. Izuku saw an odd bear, mouse, or rat. The humanoid-looking person was sitting on an oversized chair wearing a suit. Judging from the clean and neat office-looking room, the boy quickly came to realize that this indeed is the principal. "Good afternoon Principal Nedzu, I am Izuku Midoriya," Izuku introduced himself. "Hey Nedzu-san, great to see you after all this time," Aizawa said nonchalantly. Walking towards the chairs in front of Nedzu's desk and motioned Izuku to sit on one as he sat on the other. "Hello young Midoriya, it's nice to meet you." "Greetings Aizawa, wonderful to see you again," Nedzu said while closing his laptop. The door opened to show a short old woman in an oversized white coat draped over a standard doctor's uniform. But what frightened Izuku was the huge syringe she carried around as a cane. "Ah, there you are, young Midoriya, go with a recovery girl to perform your tests. Aizawa and I will have a little chat," Nedzu said, waving a paw to recovery girl. Izuku looked up to Aizawa, hesitating and looking for confirmation. Aizawa nodded and Izuku left with Chio for his quirk and medical evaluation. "So that's the child you mentioned who was responsible for the devastating incident that was caused a few weeks ago. I must say, weather manipulation is a rather rare quirk as it is volatile, and to top it off, he seems to be a dual quirk user, if I remember correctly." Nedzu asked Aizawa as he poured tea for him. "Yeah, the subject of the night is still painful to be brought up with him. He gets nightmares about his mother almost every day, but he's holding up. As for the quirk, yes it is quite rare, and according to him, he has a healing or regeneration quirk. Said he healed from a wound when he glowed green," Aizawa said, accepting the tea. An hour flew by as Aizawa and Nedzu caught up with each other, when the door opened rather harshly and a worried recovery girl stepped in. She placed Izuku's test results on Nedzu's desk. "Well, this sure seems interesting." Nedzu hummed. "What is it, recovery girl?" Aizawa asked, trying to keep his composure. Whenever something catches Nedzu's attention, it's either a good or bad sign. Chio sighed and explained, "Izuku's quirk factor definitely shows that he holds two quirks. However, it seems that the second quirk is bound to the first quirk." "Meaning?" Aizawa inquired. "Without the first one, he won't be able to use the second quirk, but that's the part that stumps me. I don't know exactly what order they are in or how they work inside his body and not overload his brain. I also noted that the healing quirk is a part of the second quirk, but it seems that the full extent of his quirk is somehow blocked by some biological firewall," she said, trying her best to impart the knowledge she just received. Nedzu, after completely reading the report, gave a glance to Aizawa, who was still trying to comprehend the information. Suddenly an idea came to his mind. "Bring young Midoriya to the main field. We can safely test his quirk there." Aizawa was about to raise his objection when both the principal and recovery girl were already making their way to the field. After reaching the training ground, Nedzu himself went somewhere else while recovery girl reasonably distanced herself, patiently waiting for the test to begin. Aizawa was relatively near to Izuku. While he reluctantly agreed to test the boy's capabilities, Aizawa stood by so that he could cancel out the boy's quirk if he went haywire. Nedzu's voice flared on the ground speaker system. "Young Midoriya, I want you to focus on your power and try to use it at the absolute minimum. Don't worry, our dear Eraserhead will take over if things go out of control. We'll be monitoring things from here." Izuku nodded to Aizawa and focused on the aura of energy, trying to access its power. Aizawa and the others were dumbfounded when the kid's whole body got surrounded by purple lightning, with noticeable purple veins started forming on his skin, and then it started raining lightly. The once sunny day turned into a cool feeling one in a snap of a second, but what was really shocking was when the veins on the kid's skin intensified. Izuku slowly lifted off the ground, and after another few seconds, when he was about 10 meters high, the sparks around his body increased as a single lightning bolt struck just in front of Izuku. That was the moment Aizawa sprung into action, erasing his quirk and catching Izuku's unconscious falling body. After placing Izuku in a bed in the nurse's office, Aizawa glared at Nedzu. "I told you this was a bad idea." Nedzu was about to say something when Chio interjected. "Both of you take a look at this. I think I found the relationship between his quirks." you see here, these are his cells when he was just causing rain, and the very minor thunderstorm. Now this is what is really alarming. You see when he suddenly lost control and caused that lightning strike, his body's cells were severely deteriorated, and that's where the other quirk comes in. It is not a healing quirk per se, but rather a cell activation quirk, which replaced the deteriorated cells with new ones, which is a blessing in disguise, if not for the second quirk. I am not sure what would have happened to this boy. Aizawa and Nedzu were both relieved and petrified of what the kid was capable of. It seems young Midoriya has an extremely dangerous quirk. Now that I have seen it from my eyes, it seems it would be best if he comes here on every weekends to gain control over his quirk. As it is now, it can cause massive catastrophe if this power went into the wrong hands. Also Aizawa, it seems the kid trusts you, and as you are the only person who can protect Izuku and the others from his own quirk, it would be wise to keep the boy, Nedzu stated while going over the test results. Aizawa thought it over. To be honest, the kid's growing on me, but sir, you know I have my hero work, not to mention as an underground hero, I certainly do not make enough money to sustain the expenses for the both of us. Nedzu thought it over. For now, for the protection of the citizens as well as this young boy, UA will fund his every need, and as for the hero work, I was going to ask you, Yamada and Kayamato come and teach here at UA, but that won't be for another 3 months, so until then leave the expenses to us and take care of that boy. Aizawa was stunned that the principal was going to such lengths to cover for a boy he barely knew. That seems reasonable. He sighed and accepted Nedzu's offer. Excellent, I knew you will accept it, Aizawa. Your apartment is being remodeled as we speak. I hope you will also accept the teaching offer when the time comes. This had been an exciting experience, Aizawa. Give the boy my regards. I have to attend a teacher's meeting. Farewell, Nedzu said as he waved and exited through the door. He had already set up a bank account. As soon as you called, I don't know why, but he seemed exceptionally caring about this kid, Chio informed Aizawa as she checked Izuku's vitals. Aizawa was relieved but was intrigued at the attention Izuku was getting from Nedzu. He shrugged and picked up the sleeping Izuku and carried him home. It had been 5 weeks since the incident, and one morning after having breakfast with Izuku, his phone rang. He looked at the caller and resisted the urge to throw the phone at the wall and burn it down to its last atom. He picked up the phone and nonchalantly said, "Hey Mike," winced as he prepared for the loud voice, "Hello Shota. How are you?" "I am fine, now tell me what is the reason for your call," Aizawa said, already done with this conversation. "Oh come on Shota, can't a friend call to say hello? I am too sober for this." "Shut up and get to the point." He heard a chuckle on the other side as present Mike said, "Just wanted to tell ya that Namari and I won 4 free pizzas. So we thought of coming over your place and eating it there." "Listen Hazashi, there's..." Aizawa was cut off as Mike exclaimed, "No way Shota. We ain't listening to any of your excuses. It's been far too long since we hung out. We just met 5 weeks ago, where you and Namari got into a fight over her weight, and while chasing you around, she wrecked my apartment," Shota deadpanned. Laughter just came out from the phone. "Oh come on Shota, don't be like that. 5 weeks is a long time, and to be frank, there's nothing you can do to stop us." Aizawa sighed as Mike hung up. He looked at the table and saw Izuku drawing. He smiled a little and tried to think of the benefits of them coming over. The kid probably deserves some distraction from all that he faced. Izuku looked at him shyly, as Aizawa smiled and complimented, "You have good drawing skills, kid." Izuku blushed a little at the compliment and handed Aizawa the drawing. The drawing was of a green-haired lady smiling beautifully as she carried a small greenette in her arms. Aizawa's heart clenched. He figured Izuku must be missing her mom. Aizawa looked at Izuku, who had teary eyes, as he said, Mr. Aizawa." Aizawa gave Izuku his attention and hummed, Will I continue to live with you? I want to stay with you. I don't care where we live, just please don't send me away. I will be good." Aizawa's heart crushed at the thought of denying him, but he didn't want to leave Izuku to someone else. The child had grown too attached to him, and the same goes for Aizawa too. Then he remembered Nedzu's words. Sighing in defeat, he rolled with it. "Okay, I'll try my best." The smile on Izuku's face was enough to brighten his day. As if on cue, the doorbell rang and Izuku said, "I'll get it." He jumped off and ran to the door excitedly. He opened the door with a smile and said, "Hello." The other two at the door froze at seeing a child inside their hobo of a friend's house as he gestured, "Come in," with a cheerful smile. Nemuri squealed loudly, lifting Izuku in the air saying, "Ah. What a cutie." She rubbed her cheek against his as she brought him inside. Izuku looked at Aizawa pleadingly and mouthed, "Help," as Aizawa chuckled lightly. Hisashi on the other hand did this, "No. Don't tell me you had a kid and hid it from us. Shota, how could you?" Mike shouted, immediately annoying Aizawa. Hisashi shut up, and Nemuri, you're scaring him. She put him down pouting as Izuku ran straight and hid behind his leg. Hisashi finally getting over his shock asked, "Shota, explain." Nemuri agreed. Aizawa sighed as he gave them an explanation of the events that occurred 5 weeks prior to this meeting. They both nodded and then he looked at Izuku and said, "Go on kid, introduce yourself." Izuku came forward and said with a radiant smile, "Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya and I am 5 years old." The guests chuckled as Nemuri cooed over him. Then Hisashi said, "Hey you little listener, my name is Hisashi Yamada and I am the pro hero present Mike." Izuku had stars in his eyes, "Whoa. So cool," and Midnight introduced herself, "Hello cutie, my name is Nemuri Kayama and my hero name is Midnight." Now Izuku was jumping with excitement, "You're a hero too. Awesome. Now, Izuku, why don't you go and draw something while we talk for a while?" "Okay," Aizawa intervened with a small smile. Izuku nodded and said, "Okay." As he skipped away, Aizawa heard a snort and saw Midnight and Mike struggling to hold their laughter. Finally letting the dam open, Hisashi said between laughs, "Who knew Shota would get attached to a child?" Midnight also laughed but suddenly grew a serious look and inquired, "But seriously, what do you plan on doing with him, Shota?" Aizawa's face turned grim. "I don't know, I have grown too attached to the kid. I don't want to let him go, but how am I supposed to raise him? Although Nedzu had said he will take care of the expenses, I am no parent material and you very well know we heroes are in constant danger." Aizawa sighed and Present Mike chimed in, "Why don't you ask him, Shota?" "Believe me, I did and he wants to stay with me wherever I go," Aizawa told them. "Then take him in, you can do your job and we will take care of him at nights for you. Don't worry, do what your heart says and remember whatever decision you take, don't regret it later," Mike advised. Midnight nodded and said, "True, your life is dull, Shota. Maybe Izuku is what you need and can be good for you to feel like a family, just think about it while we set the table." Aizawa thought deeply as he replayed every moment he had in the past 5 weeks with Izuku and how happy he was. Then he imagined a life without him and saw nothing but nagging emptiness. Aizawa made a decision, he will adopt Izuku as his own tomorrow. Maybe things will get interesting. Why 2? Let's go for 3. 3 days later, Aizawa had taken Izuku to the police station for him to give his official statement about the incident. He had already informed Naomasa about the details, but to shut the case once and for all, Izuku's statement was viable. While Izuku was lost in his own little world, he was playing with Aizawa's old capture gear which was cut to his size. In addition, Izuku had the help of Aizawa and some talks from Midnight and Mike, to overcome his nightmares. The two pros regularly came and spent time with Izuku, spoiling him with countless toys, sweets, and clothes much to Aizawa's displeasure. As they reached the station, Izuku immediately put his hands out for Aizawa to pick him up. Shota complying said, "Come on kid, why are you scared of this place?" Because they will talk about that night, Shota understood as he wrapped Izuku's capture gear as comfortably as it could get. "Don't worry, I will be here with you." A little reassured, Izuku smiled a little. As Aizawa and Izuku entered the station, they saw Nemuri and Hisashi already present along with Tsukauchi. Izuku introduced himself to Detective and gave his statement about the night. After he was done, Aizawa nudged Nemuri and after taking the hint, she exclaimed, "Welcome on Izuku. Your favorite Aunt Nemuri will take you outside to play while these old geezers talk," as she took Izuku from Aizawa and went outside. That certainly was interesting. The kid has an exceptionally rare quirk and not to mention dangerous as well. This case is finally done for, except, right now what should we do about the kid? There are no living relatives of his so we should consider foster care, Detective Tsukauchi summed up. Aizawa coughed into his fist, "There will be no need, I will be taking the kid." Naomasa gasped as he knew Aizawa hated kids, while Hisashi just smiled proudly as he was already aware of his decision. "Are you sure, Aizawa? Once you adopt him there's no going back," the detective stated. He nodded. "As much as I hate to admit it, The kid has grown on me and I can't find it in me to give him up. Brat's smile is contagious. Sukauchi smirked as he waved the adoption papers, almost teasingly. I prepared them just in case, and take this too, it is the only thing which was not destroyed in his house, this may be his mother's last remnants. Aizawa looked at the pink to red blood-colored gemstone in his hands. It's a ruby, we found it in his mother's room. It's the boy's and his mother's birthstone, not many people keep them nowadays, give it to him. I know you will do right with this kid Shota, Hizashi informed in a calm and assuring manner, which showed how serious he was. Aizawa nodded as he carefully placed the gem in a small box. Well, now that everything is over, we should head back. Goodbye Detective Mike. They walked out of the station as they hid everyone else goodbye. 3 months later, Izuku was running around his house playing with his toys, wearing a red t-shirt, shorts and a silver necklace, with a ruby embedded into it. Namori was laughing alongside Hizashi while Aizawa just laid in his sleeping bag, watching the kid having fun. Haha, you got to admit Shota, kid's got a beamish vibe, nothing ever seems to bore him, Hizashi said as Namori hummed in agreement. Aizawa, with even more menacing eyes, said, this also means I can't sleep as much, he deadpanned. Hey Shota, what about the offer Nedzu gave to teach at UA, Namori asked. Aizawa sat up and unzipped his sleeping bag, I have accepted it, I need a stable job to raise Izuku. The other two nodded, as Mike chimed in, awesome. We also accepted the offer, by the way, what about Izu-chan? Oh, he will be going with us to UA so we don't have to worry. Nedzu said he will ask some teachers to teach him till the end of elementary school and then he will join a middle school nearby, not to mention he'll need to have a decent grasp on his quirk before we could let him out of my sight. Literally, Aizawa explained as both understood and looked at Izuku, wondering about his future. Timeskip to 6-year-old Izuku and the start of new term at UA. Izuku held Aizawa's hand as they both stood outside the UA Academy, smiling brightly. Now listen Izuku, don't cause trouble okay, Aizawa instructed. Yes, sir, Izuku saluted in a playful manner. Aizawa hid a grin under his scarf, hoping no one would see and walked in. Izuku was wearing a white shirt, black shorts with his trademark red shoes and necklace. They walked inside the academy where they were greeted by Nedzu. Hello Izuku, how are you? Hello Nedzu-san, I am fine, it is nice to meet you again, Izuku shook his fist excitedly. Hey Nedzu, Shota greeted in his usual tired voice, despite having extra time to sleep. Nedzu chuckled and greeted Aizawa as well, well you should go teach your class, I won't keep you any longer, and Izuku, today we will begin training to control your quirk and aim to harness it before you start middle school. Good luck and we will meet after school. Izuku hummed and sat on Aizawa's shoulders as he went towards his class. Just as the father-son duo entered the class, the students stood up and chanted in unison, Good morning sensei. Aizawa greeted them back and turned around to write something on the board, then everyone caught sight of Izuku. He was struggling to climb up to the teacher's podium, tongue stuck out in concentration. The girls giggled seeing Izuku while the boys smiled. Tensai, a boy with engines in the ends of his elbows stood up, Sensei, if you don't mind me asking, who's the kid? The class all quieted, interested to know the mystery boy. Oh him, come on, introduce yourself, Aizawa said as he helped Izuku on the podium. Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya and I am 6 years old, he said with a huge smile. The class was in uproar, the girls cooed at the little boy, while some of the boys had an incredulous look on their faces. Silence, Aizawa said, using his quirk to add the effect. Everybody stopped talking as Tensai asked, Hey kid, are you related to Aizawa-sensei? Aha, he's my dad, Izuku said grinning, earning shocked looks from the students. Kid, are you alright? Poor boy, is there anything you need? By each second, Aizawa grew more annoyed. Suddenly the door opened and Midnight made her presence known. Oh Shotadu, she stopped midway seeing Izuku's small form standing on the podium waving at her. She bolted towards him and tackled him into a hug. Oh, little Izu-chan is here too. Hello. Auntie Namori, he wheezed, is Uncle Mike here too? Midnight nodded, yes but he's teaching right now, while I am free. So why don't we go and have some fun? Izuku turned to Aizawa with his famous puppy dog eyes. The teacher couldn't resist and sighed. Okay, enough with the eyes, go, but don't cause trouble or no ice cream for a month. Izuku paled as he jumped down from podium and went with Namori. That afternoon, after the school had ended, the three teachers, Nedzu, Recovery Girl, and Izuku met on the main field, where they first tested Izuku's quirk. When they discussed the aim of these sessions, they all agreed that if Izuku is to be allowed to go into a normal middle school, then he'd have to have a better grasp at his quirk, to avoid any accidents that may occur. Nedzu, Recovery Girl, Midnight, and Mike distanced themselves while Aizawa still stayed close to him. Alright young Midoriya, for starters, we will test how much of weather you can manipulate. I want you to slowly increase the pressure of the winds around yourself and then focus on how easily you can twist them. Nedzu's voice flared at a nearby post that had a speaker. Aizawa just hoped this wouldn't end like the previous session. Izuku focused on his quirk. The air around him started to move slowly. Then after a couple of moments a small tornado formed itself right in front of him. Just a tiny harmful gust of concentrated wind. However, Izuku lifted off the ground as purple veins started glowing on his skin. Simultaneously, the tornado started to twist violently. Taking his cue, Aizawa sprung into action and erased Izuku's quirk as he caught him. Unlike last time, Izuku was still conscious. Well, that's progress at least, Aizawa thought as he moved towards the viewing room, with the kid in his arms. Nedzu and Recovery Girl were smiling at the screen, while the other two occupants reacted completely differently than the other two. Wow, Izu-chan. You were so cool. Why didn't you tell us you could do that? Before Izuku could respond, Recovery Girl spoke up. Yes, Izuku does have an excellent quirk, and we found out something interesting. See this? Just as Izuku lost control, the tornado went violent. The cell deterioration still happened but was remarkably lower than the time when he fired a lightning bolt. That means simpler uses of his quirk could be easy to control and will cause little to no harm to his body thanks to his second quirk quickly stepping in and repairing the damaged cells. Everyone understood the somewhat complicated explanation, while Izuku was just happy to see so many people trying to help him master his quirk. Okay then Izuku, from now on, you will practice your quirk here after school on every alternate day. You can take any breaks if you want, but the faster we can get you to control your gift, the better. He nodded as Aizawa picked him up and went home with Hizashi and Namori in tow. Izuku had a lot of fun at UA Academy. He met several heroes, who caught him up on his school work. He was personally instructed by his father to perfect his quirk. They started Izuku's physical training when he was 7. At the age of 9, Izuku had already started stretching, several fitness exercises, lightweight lifting, and finally long runs to increase stamina and endurance. It was at this point that Recovery Girl found out that the better physical shape Izuku is in, the better his body can hold the extent of his power without damaging it severely and also providing him fine control over his quirk. So Aizawa turned up the notch on his exercises and changed his diet for more fat and protein-based. It was also the point where All Might fought All for One for the first time and seemingly won. At the age of 10, Izuku became obsessed with analyzing quirks and wanting to know all about them. He started keeping entries on his notes whenever he came across any type of quirk. Aizawa encouraged this hobby as it would help him in future against several opponents and improve his quick thinking in any type of situation. When Izuku turned 11, Aizawa started sparring with him to sharpen his style and perfecting it, because as of now, Izuku's biggest drawback was closed quarters hand-to-hand combat. He'd need an open space and a lot of focus to use his quirk in a battle otherwise. The day finally came, the day of Nedzu's final evaluation for Izuku's control over his quirk. If it went well, he would get to choose a school of his choice. Izuku was ecstatic. He'd finally put years of training into practice and will prove himself. Currently being led by Aizawa to the same old field where they once started the small training all those years ago. He saw the familiar group of people waiting in the viewing room as he and Aizawa walked towards the field. Before Aizawa let Izuku go on his own, he smirked. Good luck out there Izuku, you got this. He ruffled the green-haired boy. Izuku wanted his father to be proud of him. Thanks Dad. He walked a little further from Aizawa until he was at a safe distance. Nedzu's voice rang throughout the same speaker. Izuku felt goosebumps once he heard his voice. Good morning young Izuku, let's start with the test. I will be the one giving you tasks that you must complete to pass. He paused for a dramatic effect. Recovery girl here will be focusing on your vitals. An Eraserhead will take action if things get out of hand. Now to start off, I want you to first greatly increase the temperature of your surroundings and then decrease it instantly. Izuku complied as he focused, and the readings on a nearby screen reached a temperature where it would feel like sitting in a sauna, and greatly decreased as if you were standing before a refrigerator. Aizawa and the others shivered, despite not being that close, for the others of course. Very good Izuku, now cause rain and slowly increase its intensity, and once you have done that, I want you to cause a full-blown thunderstorm with 2 small individual tornadoes all at once. Nedzu commanded. The other occupants grew a little worried for the kid. Izuku obeyed as he slowly lifted off the ground and caused rain pouring down heavily. Then he moved his fingers as the air pressure severely increased and formed 2 small tornadoes circling around Izuku. You stand by my expectations, Izuku, and while your cells are deteriorating, it isn't matching the pace of your second quirk replacing them. As for the final task, I want you to cause 2 different lightning bolts striking at those 2 dummies we have provided at the field. He saw the dummies, one was near him while the other was pretty far away. He closed his eyes and deeply focused while staying in midair. Izuku felt his hair starting to float up as the purple veins on his skin intensified. Aizawa was about to intervene when suddenly 2 massive lightning bolts struck on the dummies, burnt to ashes. Aizawa, being the closest, smelled what seemed like the ozone. Everyone watched in awe as Izuku slowly descended on the ground, purple veins vanishing as he stumbled and got caught by Aizawa's arms. Hey, I did it, Dad. I finally did it. Aizawa was so proud as he smiled and helped Izuku to the viewing room. Namori and Hizashi were the first ones to greet the father-son duo as they tackled them into a group hug, all of them happy to see Izuku's hard work pay off. Nedzu and Recovery Girl were also proud at the work Izuku has sweat and bled for. It seems that the lightning strikes are the moves that deteriorate your cells well beyond the pace of your second quirk, so until it's matched I won't advise you to do more than 2 of those at a time. As for the other moves, your body managed to control your power just fine. Chio reported her analysis for the final test. Yes, it seems young Izuku has made quite a bit of progress. I can't wait for the time we get to teach you here at our fine institution, but for the time being, I want you to know I am very impressed, and it's not an easy feat to make that happen. Your hard work paid off, young man. Now I advise you to get ready for your middle school. After all, it starts in a few months. Good luck, Nedzu proudly said as he handed Izuku his student ID card for his middle school. Izuku and the 3 pros took a look at the card that said, Somei Private Academy. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Web. A ray of sunshine, in darkest of hours. 6 years ago, across the ocean, David and Melissa were sitting in front of their family doctor in hope of finding out the younger Shield's quirk. It has been a year since her peers have started showing signs for their development. So to find out if there is a problem, they finally consulted a professional. I am sorry, Mr. Shield, but Melissa here appears to be quirkless. When quirks first started appearing, there were many theories as to what were the cause of these individualities. There was one thing in common there, that people with quirks have only one joint in their pinky toe, kind of like yourself. These individuals have evolved into a more streamlined form of the human body, and as you can see here, Melissa have 2 joints, so it's safe to say that she may never develop a quirk. The doctor handed the X-ray scans to David. My records say that Mrs. Shield was also quirkless. Then this occurrence is not surprising and moreover indicates that Melissa indeed inherited this from her maternal side. I hope this clears up any doubts the 2 of you may have. Melissa was frozen. Her worst fears were becoming a reality right before her eyes. Her dream of becoming a heroine was crumbling. Before she could drown herself in self-pity, David spoke up. Yes, thank you. We'll be taking our leave now. He picked up the almost lifeless body of Melissa and carried her home. David couldn't stand to see his daughter so broken. After all, she was the light of his life that kept him alive after the untimely passing of his wife. Melissa was the only thing keeping David's mind and soul together. Melissa was sitting on the couch staring into nothingness as David, in an attempt to cheer her up, knelt before her with a small smile on face. Hey pumpkin. Come on, don't be so grim. You know quirks aren't everything, right? I mean, look at me. The only thing my quirk does is allow me to bend my fingers a little more than a normal person. Melissa's eyes were filled with tears as she jumped and tightly hugged her father. I know, it's okay Dad, and, thank you. In the park, a young Melissa reflected on how cool and awesome the heroes are, because they all have a quirk that they use to save other people. Melissa's friends approached to ask her to play heroes with them using their quirks, but one reminded the others that Melissa is quirkless. They apologized for being so inconsiderate. Melissa told them to not worry about it, they are just playing. She tells herself that she doesn't mind being quirkless, and she can play with them as the person who needs to be saved. While playing, she noticed that people frequently looked at her with confusion, downcasted looks, and pity for not having a special power like them. Although Melissa tried to downplay her condition, in reality she was still heavy-hearted for not having a quirk like the rest of the kids. Then one day, David woke up to Melissa poking him in his side after he had fallen asleep while working on support items. She asked him if he ever wanted to be a hero. He told her that he never put thought into it, because with his quirk, it would be a quite difficult task. Melissa felt greatly confused by the answer. Before she could inquire any further, a loud knock was heard as a pound. "I am here," All Might exclaimed as he entered the home. Making his way to David's workshop, he was greeted by the sight of a small blonde girl standing behind a very tired dad. "Well, hello young Melissa, it is I. All Might. I am a hero from Japan. It's a pleasure to meet you," he greeted Melissa. While intimidated by his presence, she greeted him back with a small hello. "Hey Toshi, it's been a while," David tiredly mumbled from his seat. "Ah yes, since my debut I have been called to many pleads," All Might sincerely said. David noticed the perplexed expression on Melissa's face. "Oh, Melissa, All Might and I go way back to our college days, when he was an exchange student visiting the States from Japan. In our olden days we were an awesome hero support duo, and since then, I had been creating All Might's hero costumes till this day. As a matter of fact, I am here for the new suit your father had created for me." Melissa beamed at the realization that the hero was currently wearing one of her father's designed costumes. After a while, Melissa was walking down the street headed towards the park, while her father and Mr. Might caught up with each other. At that moment, a person called David's house alarmed, telling him to run away as soon as possible because a huge tornado had suddenly formed in the town and was headed straight for them. All Might sprung into action and picked up David and bolted to drop him to safety first and then deal with the tornado. As he was carrying his friend he heard, "Toshi, Melissa. She's outside, please find her please." Complying with David's demands, All Might dropped him at a safe distance and sped off to find Melissa. When he reached back to the town the whole block was demolished. All Might watched in horror as the tornado grew more violent, and he realized if he retaliated now, there could be many casualties. Melissa quickly ran to the hero, hoping that her father would be there among the crowd the hero was forming due to panic. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw what most people would miss. A short old lady was wheezing hard, trying to remove the heavy debris on her legs. What happened next, Melissa doesn't even remember. "Young lady, come back here," she ignored the pro-hero's pleas who was ushering the group of people away from the destruction. It was so exhilarating, it just felt so right for her. Dodging a few sharp rocks and loose wires, she finally made it to the old lady, not knowing that the cause of destruction was just a few meters away. "Child, you got to escape, leave this old bag alone, save yourself," the old lady pathetically coughed. Melissa couldn't help but cry. She wants her to leave but the younger Shield doesn't want to. "No, how can I leave you here when you need help?" With all the strength Melissa could muster, she lifted the huge chunk off the lady's legs, pushing it with her back. Making sure that the elder wasn't hurt, Melissa placed her onto her back. It was when she felt the harsh winds pulling them in, but she wouldn't give in. A couple of people saw the two and helped them away from the tornado. Melissa was about to pass out when she heard a faint Detroit smash, and everything went silent. Melissa awoke to find herself in an unfamiliar room. She looked up at the plain white ceilings. When she saw the complimentary TV, realization hit her that she was in a hospital room and all the past events of the day came rushing back. She was lying in the hospital bed, her right arm wrapped up in bandages. She uncomfortably shifted when she saw the news was on, and an area that seemed oddly familiar. Melissa carefully heard and found out that it was their home block and the footage showed Mr. Might carry multiple people on his back and then, he cocked back his arm and he completely diminished the tornado with a single punch. Suddenly the door of her room opened and her father, along with Mr. Might, walked in. David rushed to hug the now conscious Melissa and kissed her temple. "I am so glad you are alright. All Might told me what you did. Why did you scare me like that?" Melissa looked down sadly. "Sorry, Dad." "David, if you don't mind, can I talk to Melissa about something?" "I will only take a few minutes, but this is important," All Might said, not in his usual upbeat tone. This made Melissa shiver, as she was expecting him to be scolding her about the way she acted, and most likely interfering with his work. As David reluctantly nodded and took his leave, All Might took a seat beside Melissa. "Young Melissa, I am blissful that you are alright, but the way you acted out there was very reckless. You could have gotten badly injured." Melissa was not the type to talk back to adults, but she felt compelled to defend her actions. But Mr. Might, if I didn't do anything, that lady would have died. As soon as I saw her, my legs started moving on their own. Before I knew it, I was lifting the debris off of her." "Good. Now David tells me you want to become a hero. Can you tell me why?" Well, that certainly wasn't the response Melissa expected, especially now that she was officially quirkless. "I want people to see my fearless smile and feel safe. I think saving someone is the coolest thing someone can do." She paused as her voice came out muffled between soft crying. "It doesn't matter anyway, Mr. Might. I'm quirkless after all." Strangely, All Might's demeanor didn't change. There was no look of pity on his face as he comprehended the information. "So, young lady, I commend your bravery, but more importantly I want to thank you. Your actions deeply inspired me today." "So what if you are quirkless? Of all the people at the scene, it was you who acted. You spurred me into acting without any hesitation." Most of the top heroes have shown signs of greatness in their early years. Many of them claim that their bodies moved before they could think, almost on their own, and today, that's what happened to you. You saved that old lady from an almost sufferable death without any care for your own life. Today, you acted like a true hero. Somewhere in between All Might's speech, Melissa had started crying, pouring all of the bottled up emotions inside. "Young lady, always remember, a hero is not known for their quirk. A true hero is known for their heart, and you have the heart of a hero. Listen to me well, never give up on your dreams because something seems unachievable. Nothing on this godforsaken green planet is impossible. Melissa, Shield, you too can become a hero." All Might ended his speech as he patted Melissa's head, who was hugging herself. That was when David slammed open the door, demanding what he did to his sweet innocent daughter. David and All Might encouraged Melissa to pursue her dream to become a hero, as they also planned for her fitness, both of the Shields unaware of the real plan Toshinori had in mind. It was decided that Melissa will start basic exercises and learn multiple fighting styles to help her with hand-to-hand combat. Of course, Melissa's progress was checked monthly by the now pronounced Uncle Might. After a few months, All Might finally took his new costume and went back to Japan, promising both Shields that he will be back. As the years passed by, All Might became the #1 hero and world symbol of peace. Melissa was ecstatic about the fact that she was personally being trained by a man of such greatness who also happens to be her uncle. When Melissa turned 9, she was professionally trained in many martial arts, weaponry, and sword fighting. It was at this point when All Might had his devastating battle with AFO, which he seemingly won. He was gravely injured and couldn't return to the States for many months, but he knew he'd have to face their scolding. Melissa turned 11 when she reunited with All Might after all this time. First, she was surprised to see who was the lanky sort of man standing at their doorbell. After hearing the story of how All Might defeated an evil overlord, which came with a price to his health, she understood the reason behind his absence. David, Melissa and the now deflated Toshinori were sitting in the living room of Shield household, where Toshinori was explaining the events that transpired in his time away from them. Toshinori's demeanor slowly changed into that of what most people would just assume is a constipated look, especially when he closed his eyes in concentration. "You should know something about my quirk and my past. I trust that both of you and what we speak here won't leave this room. The true name of my power is one for all." And so, Toshinori explained the legendary quirk he was entrusted with. The Shields were dumbfounded once the explanation was over. "Okay, so let me get this straight. Your quirk was bestowed upon you by your sensei, and this transferable quirk goes way back to the dawn of quirks, and since it is a stockpile quirk, as it's passed on, the more powerful it'll become, but you won't last long with this power now that your body was drained of its use. Based on its transferable ability, you're looking for a successor, and since you're training my daughter David trailed on. In a nutshell, yes, Melissa has a true heart of a hero, and I believe she deserves to be my successor and one day even surpass me. Toshinori continued as he roughed up Melissa's hair. And I'm going to say this, I am not going to force this quirk on you. This is her decision, if she wants my awesome power or not. Melissa didn't even think twice before she nodded her head vigorously. Yes, Uncle Might. I will do it, determined to make her father and mentor proud. No reluctance. Huh, that's how I figured you'd respond, but I can't transfer it right now, because as of now, your body isn't fully prepared yet. My quirk is basically a hurricane of pure power that an unprepared body will detonate if they try to inherit it. Both father and daughter paled, but understood that a great power will come with consequence. Oh sweet lord, the three don't have any idea how true this is. David, I know you wanted her to join a hero school in States, but as of now I can't move here, so I would propose that Melissa come to Japan to attend a middle school there. Her Japanese is already fluent, and I already picked her a safe private institution for her that can be trusted with our secrets. Then she can join the high school I attended. Melissa was excited as she turned around to use her innocent wide puppy dog eyes on her father. That would certainly help her training the quirk. Not to mention I truly respect Nedzu. I may have met him only a couple of times, but that is one terrifyingly smart animal. And over the years of working with you I have learned to trust your judgment, although, it will be lonely around the house without Melissa. Hey. Maybe I can finally move on with the island idea, David said his thoughts out loud. All Might and Melissa cheered at the approval David gave them. That's great news, David. Now young lady, you better pack up for Japan. After all, school will start soon. Spend as much time with your father as you can. Here is your school's admission letter and your ID card. Now I must be off. I do have to set up things back in Japan for your arrival after all. Toshinori beamed as he handed over a couple of envelopes and an ID card to Melissa. It seemed that he was a few steps ahead of them already. David and Melissa gave a quick glance to it that read, Somei Private Academy. Melissa Shield. Quirk. Superpower. Oh. Ouch, why there? It was a cold winter morning. Izuku was leaving with Aizawa for his weekly quirk practice routine. In a week he was to start with his middle school and was trying to get a better grasp at his lightning. They reached Ua and headed straight to his designated training field. Upon the final test by Nedzu, he had given Izuku some free rein. He was allowed to roam about the campus as long as he informed a pro where he was. Also, Nedzu and Recovery Girl were no longer part of his weekly practices, but as a precaution, Aizawa was to be present there at all times. Izuku and Aizawa reached their spots and began with their mild warm-up session, so they could smoothly continue their training without any hassle. Melissa had landed in Japan a couple of weeks ago, and due to her Uncle Might already arranging everything that she might require upon her stay here, she was already fitting in with the foreign place. When Toshinori had told Nedzu that he had chosen a successor that happened to be his best friend's daughter, Nedzu made the arrangements for her to start her middle school education in Japan, and subsequently when she finally landed here, he couldn't contain his excitement and asked him to bring her to his alma mater. Melissa was ecstatic about meeting Principal Nedzu. She had learned a lot about him and his past from her father. She also knew that he was the principal of the school that Melissa will be applying to in a couple of years, so saying she was thrilled and scared to meet the individual would be an understatement. The successor and predecessor went up to Ua in his car. At first she was a little surprised by the fact that the number one hero drove a beat-up station wagon, but she guessed that it would let him remain incognito, as no one would suspect such a thing. The ride to UA was a silent but peaceful one. After they reached the gates of UA, Melissa was gawking at the sight. She was at one of the finest institutions the world has to offer. Toshinori was filled with a warm feeling, remembering his time as a hero in training. He pushed those thoughts aside as he walked with Melissa in tow, right to the principal's office. Melissa was staring at the huge door that said, Principal Nedzu. As she was about to knock on the door, Toshinori voiced, Now, young Melissa, the principal can be a little scary, but he means well. Before she could ask what was that about, the door opened revealing a bear, mouse, individual, wearing a suit sitting on an oversized chair, gawking at the screen in front of him. Good morning Principal Nedzu, I am Melissa Shield. It's nice to finally meet you. I have heard a lot about you from Dad. Melissa greeted and bowed as Toshinori pulled a chair for her to sit on and one for himself. "Ah, good morning young Melissa, Toshinori, I hope you are enjoying your stay here in Japan. I know it wasn't easy for you to leave your father like that and start all over here." Nedzu offered both occupants a cup of tea as he also greeted them both. "It was all right, I mean I do miss Papa, but I can finally see myself achieve my dream, and for that, it's a price to pay." She delightedly took a sip of tea. "I am glad to hear that, and just so you know, if All Might haven't told you yet, the reason I wanted to see you was because I wanted to meet the soon-to-be 9th user of One for All," Nedzu stated flatly, not cryptidly like he always spoke in. Melissa was taken aback with the sudden bluntness from Nedzu's part, but let it slide. What really caught her attention was the fact that Nedzu knew about All Might's secret power. She glanced at Toshinori as he spoke up. "Yes young Melissa, Nedzu is one of the few individuals that know about One for All. And it would certainly help you in your time at UA, another to have at your side. Yes indeed, I want you to know that if there's any problem regarding the quirk, I'm also here if you need to discuss anything about it." Nedzu chirped as he took the last sip on the never-ending tea. "Allow me to formally welcome you to Japan, and I hope I will see you in our fine institution in years to come." Melissa was about to thank him, when suddenly the sound of thunder was heard, followed by a cackle of electricity. She glanced outside the windows, the once clear day. All Might was alarmed immediately, and the nostalgia of a similar fateful event came rushing back. Just when they were about to deal with it, Nedzu stopped them and told them it's a kid's quirk and he is practicing. They followed Nedzu to the main field where Izuku was doing his routine quirk application tests. They were in awe as they saw a young man around the same age as Melissa, levitating midair with purple veins forming on his body as he played around with the weather like it was as easy as drinking water. While both of them were baffled to see a kid with immense power, the purple veins that were on him were now bouncing around the young man. The familiar sight of him floating gave Toshinori mixed feelings, either anger or sorrow. Aizawa and Izuku saw two blondes with Nedzu coming his way. He paid caution to the wind and came back to the ground. Melissa noticed the weather change immediately back to its peaceful setting. She had multiple questions running through her mind, but one stood out: who was this boy? "It seems you are increasing your proficiency on the lightning bolts, though I must remind you about Recovery Girl's warning. Your body cannot handle more than 2 of those, so keep that in mind," Nedzu said as he walked to Izuku and Aizawa. Aizawa was aware of All Might's condition and was baffled to see a similar blonde beside him. Did he have a secret child or something, he thought as he greeted Nedzu. "Ah, where are my manners, young Melissa, Toshinori, this is young Izuku Midoriya, Izuku, this is Melissa Shield, and Toshinori Yagi, All Might's assistant, as his agency." Izuku's tired eyes were now filled with stars. "Wow. Shield. As in the great David Shield, he is the world's most renowned scientist who is sure to win this year's Nobel Quirk Prize. And was the genius behind all the All Might's suits, and to this day. And whoa, you work alongside All Might himself. How is he in person? Can you please get me an autograph? Or is that too straightforward? I mean, it's not every day that I get to meet someone who works alongside Then Umberon hero Orthe, and they lost him." Aizawa was smirking beside watching his son's antics. It's been a while since he went on such an intense muttering spree. "It's normal, nothing is wrong with him, I had him tested." "I am Shota Aizawa. Looks like Nedzu lost me in the introductions there, not that I care." He glared at what he likes to call a rat. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Melissa, nice to see you are doing better, Yagi-san." After they took the small time to greet each other, Izuku stopped fanboying and apologized for his muttering. Toshinori formally introduced his honorary niece who had the dream of becoming a pro hero one day. Izuku, taking his cue, introduced himself as Aizawa's adopted son and that he wished to follow the same path. Toshinori was surprised that the cold-hearted Aizawa had a son, but noticed that he introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya. "By the way, if I may ask, why is that your surname? Isn't Aizawa yet?" he curiously asked. Aizawa was about to intervene before things got out of hand but was interrupted by Izuku. "Sorry sir, but I don't know you well enough to share that information with you." Izuku bluntly. Melissa and Toshinori saw him drop his eyes to the side in sadness and wisely decided not to pry in what happened. After some light-hearted conversations, Melissa and Toshinori took their leave while Aizawa and Nedzu were busy discussing something. Izuku was now 12, He was currently growing into a fine young man who remained calm and collected, standing at 5 feet 4 with an almost well-built body, and his now unkempt long curly green hair. It was his first day of middle school. He was so excited he didn't even get a wink of sleep last night. After having everything ready and his bag packed, he left off with Aizawa to his new school. After a good 30-minute drive, they came within viewing distance of the school. Izuku was shocked that the school was absolutely massive and was now in the rich part of town. Izuku imagined the price to go to this school was astronomical. The golden plaque outside the school read, "Somei Private Academy." He thought the name sounded familiar, but he wasn't 100% certain on that. Shota thought, "Good thing Nedzu is paying for the school, I would go bankrupt if I were to do it." As they walked to the gates, he hit the comms button before the doors opened, allowing the two to enter. It was a long walk from the gates to the main building. They finally reached the building as Shota and Izuku made their way to the teacher's lounge to meet his homeroom teacher before the school would begin their sessions. When they entered, they were astonished to see the familiar sight of two familiar blondes sitting opposite to a woman with jet black hair, and with a vibe that gave off that she was an office worker. Both of them sat next to the blondes and greeted the teacher, who introduced herself as Mrs. Yaoyorozu, which was a mouthful to say the least. Apparently Izuku and Melissa were going to be in the same class as her daughter, and she hoped they would get along as her daughter was kind of a loner due to previous situations she had been through. Izuku and Melissa just nodded and said they would do their best. Izuku and Melissa were just happy that they had at least one friendly face in the new setting. When the students made their way to their assigned classes, the revelation hit Toshinori and Aizawa like a truck that Nedzu was responsible for picking out the school for both of them, and neither of them didn't even want to think what that could mean. Once Izuku and Melissa finally made their way to class, they were asked to introduce themselves, which went well for the first impression. After that, they made their way to the empty desks at the back and noticed who must have been Mrs. Yaoyorozu's daughter, because she looked like a carbon copy of the teacher and just shrunk down. The classes continued uneventfully. In a rather free period, Izuku and Melissa got acquainted to each other much better than the first time around. They shared their motives of becoming a hero, their likes, dislikes, and hobbies. During this, they would glance around the room and would see several groups of kids talking among themselves, but the onyx-haired girl would just read her book sitting alone. The rest of the day passed by, much to Izuku's boredom, that is until lunch. Izuku and Melissa had just devoured their meals, before looking around the cafeteria. They saw Yaoyorozu by herself and decided to go sit down with her. "Hello Yaoyorozu, do you mind if we sit here?" Izuku noticed everyone was staring at them like they were idiots. The girl simply shrugged and decided to give the two a chance. "You may." "Thanks, it's super hard starting a new school, when everyone already has their friend circles." Melissa rubbed the back of her head awkwardly, getting kinda weirded out by the fact that the cafeteria had gone nearly silent. Izuku could feel the stares boring into the back of his head. He tried his best to ignore them. "So what's your quirk, Yaoyorozu?" Izuku didn't miss how Melissa flinched at the question. The girl visibly shook when Izuku asked that. He backpedaled immediately. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was a personal thing. You don't have to say anything." Melissa visibly relaxed at that. The girl looked like she was deliberating something before finally responding. "No, it's fine, my quirk is called creation. I can make any non-organic material as long as I know the chemical makeup and I have enough lipids to generate the item in question." They watched her make a small metal rod appear from her hand. "Wow, that's amazing Yaoyorozu, there are so many ways to use that. So the more you eat, the more you can make," Melissa added, both girls unaware of what Izuku was thinking. "Like how works." As soon as he commented that, the cafeteria was so quiet you could probably hear a pin drop, Izuku immediately regretted his wording as the girl in front of him was about to explode. Melissa was beet red, cause she knew, it was her that led them to this moment. Then at the moment of judgment, Momo burst out laughing. This gave the whole room a sigh of relief. When the commotion settled down a bit, Izuku apologized if he'd offended her somehow, to which she waved it off. "Yaoyorozu, if I may ask you a question, why are they all staring at us?" Izuku whispered to the girl, a bit embarrassed. "It's because of me most likely. The last guy who tried to sit next to me I kicked in the crotch." She looked pained as she said that. While Melissa tried containing her laughter, Izuku was horrified and unconsciously covered his, "Oh do I need to worry?" Everyone around him was still staring and it was getting unnerving. That has yet to be seen, Midoriya, so tell me, why did you two transfer here from out of nowhere? Momo then shot a look at everyone in the cafeteria as they all slowly but surely returned to their own conversations. Oh, that's easy, I was kind of homeschooled till now, due to the lack to control I had on my sort of dangerous quirk, so as soon as I got a better grasp at it, I came here. Melissa was about to retort on the sort of dangerous part, as she witnessed his quirk firsthand, but shook away the thought. And until last year, I used to live in States with my papa, so when we decided that I wanted to go to UA, to become a hero, he and uncle thought that it would be wise if I attended middle school here, so as to fit in better in the new environment, Melissa said flatly, a bit clueless on how much emotion she should put in the Japanese words. That sure is the rational way of doing things, but pray do tell me what is that about your dangerous quirk? Yoayorizu was confused about what kind of quirk the resident greenette and seemingly innocent person could possess. It's weather manipulation, but it's really dangerous, like I can cause thunderstorms, hurricanes, and terrifying lightning strikes, by just a flick of a finger, though it kinda destroys my cells. That's where my second quirk comes in, it heals my cells as soon as they are destroyed by my first quirk. Both girls were stunned. While being a dual quirk user wasn't uncommon, but what was really surprising is how both were extremely rare quirks. Melissa quickly, in an attempt to change the topic, chimed in, by the way Yaoyorozu, why did you kick the guy in his? Izuku completed where she trailed off. Izuku watched as Yaoyorozu sputtered out milk while giggling. She looked at the confused face on Midoriya for a moment before swallowing what milk she still had left and answered. I knew it, you aren't part of the upper class, are you? We wouldn't be caught dead using any language as crass as that, and it's the second time you've done so. Oh, I see, is there anything else I should know? Izuku blushed, feeling like he was being looked down on. The girl just laughed, no offense Midoriya, but the etiquette they teach us takes years to learn. Besides, I like you more this way, it's way more refreshing talking to someone who isn't so stuffy all the time. Also, if you wanted to know why I kicked him in the... He was acting like a complete fool, he came over and attempted to court me. His advances were unwelcome to say the least. Izuku just made a mental note not to get on Yaoyorozu's bad side, whereas Melissa was barely controlling her giggling. Is the commoner already being a bad influence on the young misses? We wouldn't want them to corrupt such noble ladies, Izuku said as he drew out his haughtiest impression. Thankfully, the horrid impression of nobility only seemed to make the girls laugh more. At that moment, a similar thought passed each of their minds, they were gonna like it here. By each passing day, the trio's friendship grew, and before they knew it, they became best friends, wondering where were they in their childhood. They would walk together after school, go on small picnics together, visit each other's homes, and study with each other for exams. During their second year of middle school, they essentially became inseparable. On one fateful day, they were visiting a small shop that was just a block away from their school. It was owned by a nice old lady. Over the time they had developed a habit to visit her store at least once every week to pick out some candies. When they were stuffing their baskets with them, they heard a loud voice coming from the counter. Hey, put the money in the bag before I put this bullet through your head. Quick, a loud voice said, followed by what seemed to be the person ready to pull the trigger. All the three froze in space, the nice lady was being robbed, they had to help her. Izuku wanted to spur into action, but he knew his quirk was almost useless in a small place like this. This would have been a perfect opportunity for Melissa to show her strength-based quirk that she told them she possessed, but seeing the look of hesitation on her face, he quickly turned to Momo, who like was processing the situation around them. An idea came to Izuku's mind. Hey Yaoyorozu, make a tranquilizing dart, me and Melissa will make an opening for you to shoot, Izuku whispered. She complied, and as her two comrades ran off screaming, startling the wannabe villain. Momo, a tube in front of her mouth, blew as hard as she could as the robber felt a tiny sharp item poke his neck and collapsed afterwards. The three of them called the police and explained the incident, while the lady thanked them for their actions and offered them free candies, to which they declined and paid. This incident was bittersweet for the three of them, as for all intents and purposes they didn't want such a situation to happen in the first place, but like they say, people fighting together will strengthen their bond. A week had passed since that incident, and the growing bond between the three seemed to have strengthened a lot more, that is until One day Izuku woke up from a very strange dream. It was like he was in a black void and some muffled voices could be heard in the background, but whatever they were saying wasn't comprehensible. Then a bright light flashed before his eyes and he woke up panting and sweating profusely. When he saw his hand, he was shocked to see a small blackish hole at the center on both of his palms. He ran towards the living room to find Aizawa making breakfast. He saw the confused expression on Izuku's face and then noticed something about his hair. "Izuku, what's with your hair? It's white, did you dye it?" he said, pointing at the side of Izuku's hair where a small patch of green had turned to a sickly white color. "Huh, are you kidding me? I am getting old, and no way I'd do that," Izuku said, running his hand through his hair and grabbing it. Izuku showed him his hands. "By the way, Dad, I just woke up from a really weird dream, and then I saw these were formed." Aizawa saw the holes on the palms of his hands and cursed inwardly. Just when the problem child finally made headway with his quirk, something new happened. "Guess you are going to UA today rather than this weekend," Aizawa sighed and groaned. "Porno, you mean hunger?" Last night was still a blur for Izuku. The dream, the feeling of being in that void, indistinct murmurs that were falling deaf to his ears, the eerily feeling of someone watching him from afar, waiting to grasp him, and the overwhelming feeling of power that was suddenly coursing through his veins. He had never felt like this before. He felt like a part of himself was free, a part that he didn't even know existed. He felt confident, like his charisma had just been leveled up, felt complete yet empty, like there was something he needed to find, take it for himself. It was like a part of himself was longing for something he could not figure out. He felt hunger, the type that typical meals cannot fulfill. Then there were these physical changes he had gone through that night. When people said hitting puberty would be a different experience, they failed to mention it could be this surreal. His hair color was partially changing, some bangs of white hair on the sides were clearly standing out, and the holes in his hands were uncanny. While they were not hindering any of his daily tasks, the curiosity in his mind was continuously growing by the second. How had this happened to me? What is the purpose of these changes and what is stopping me from getting that same feeling from before? These thoughts were plaguing his mind ever since he woke up. He couldn't shake the eldritch feeling. Last time his quirk acted up, he lost the single most important person in his life, and now that he had reinstated that title, it was happening again. Izuku might not show it, but he had started viewing Aizawa as his own father figure, not adopted, not a stepfather, but someone he held dearly in his heart, and if something were to happen to this man, he would go feral and instill the world to its doom. But it would be devastating if he were the cause of it. He pushed these thoughts aside and focused on the outside world. Aizawa had talked it out with Nedzu on the phone that since the developments are not causing any distress at the moment, so they decided it can be looked into after school. Aizawa informed Izuku that he would pick him up and they would visit UA. Currently, he was trying his best to push these phantasmagoric visions of the void as he looked at his palms. The ride to the school was a quiet one, perhaps because both of them enjoyed the peaceful silence. As he bid his father goodbye, he was struck with the thought of how he would explain these changes to his comrades, especially his two best friends. He was jolted out of his thoughts when he found that he was already at his classroom's door and relentlessly entered. He was immediately noticed by Melissa and Momo, who were inanimmately chatting. Seeing the familiar set of eyes linger about his features was a little unnerving, but finally they settled at the most recognizable alteration, his hair. He stepped towards his seat. "Hey Melissa, hello Momo, how are you two on this fine morning?" He gave them a warm smile as he sat next to Melissa. The sudden increment in his confidence seemed to be making him smooth. "Well, at least I don't have to go to Auntie Nimari's lessons on how to court a lady," he mused. "Someone's in a good mood, Tilda," Melissa teased as she lightly nudged him. Over the time together, Melissa had discovered that the weapon of teasing was quite effective against the resident greenette, but something was different today. He didn't even blush, much less stuttered. "You know, Izuku, for someone who is turning old this fast, you are certainly joyful about it," Momo interjected. While she was taken aback by his sudden assertiveness, she felt like it would be best to acknowledge the elephant in the room before anyone else called in on it, so she did. "So, what happened with your hair? You sure were just fine until yesterday, or did you dye it?" Izuku was about to voice his reasons, but Melissa beat him to it. "Yay, are you trying to look cool? Though your purple veins from your quirk would look way better with white hair than the contrasting green tuft." Taking control of the situation, and before more theories could be put together, he sighed. To be honest, I don't know as to why these developments took place the way they did, but, he explained to the girls the events that transpired that fateful night, the dream and the other changes. Oh wow, that is really weird. Do you think it's your quirk acting up again? Momo asked. She was flabbergasted when she first saw Izuku's quirk in action. She even called it a godly power, to which both the teens reminded that her creation quirk fell into the very same category, after which she blushed and ultimately relented. She was even more amazed that he got to practice at UA, before even graduating middle school. She was aware that his adopted father was a pro-hero teacher there, but, still it was no low feat in Momo's eyes. And when she got the chance to visit him at the said place, she was even impressed at how the pro teachers treated Izuku, as a part of their family. If she were being honest, she was kind of jealous at first, but the more she learned about his past and his abilities, it all made sense to her. Yay, Dad and I are going to visit Nedzu and Recovery Girl, to see if it's a major issue and what could be the logical course of action, Izuku stated as he saw the teacher enter and the whole class quieted down. The rest of the classes were passed uneventfully, but Izuku still felt some visions clouding his mind, not to mention the newfound confidence slipping away from his grasp. Izuku wasn't aware how it happened, but, just before recess, he fell asleep. Maybe it was because of the mind-numbingly boring geography class, or the fact that he got little to no sleep last night. However, when he woke up, he found that he was already in the cafeteria, and two pairs of familiar eyes were upon him. One was giggling and the other was looking in concern. "Good morning, sleepyhead. You were really lucky, Mr. Hirano didn't catch you dozing off there," Melissa informed as he picked up his head and tried to comprehend the situation he was in. "Yeah, we thought you should eat before the rest of the classes ensue, so we brought you here," Momo said as she pushed a cup of hot steaming coffee towards him. "Okay," he took a sip, but backpedaled. "Hey, what do you mean, brought me here?" The girls just laughed it off, not letting the fact that they carried an unconscious Izuku to the cafeteria, and the awkward stares they received on the way. As if he was a drunk man who hung out with his friends at the bar. Izuku took a massive bite off the pork he was eating and quickly ate more, seemingly as he had a never-ending stomach. Especially when he's rushed from coffee, as he ignored the looks he got from Momo and Melissa. Setting down his silverware, he wiped his mouth but still felt somewhat hungry. As if someone else took control of him, he felt something drawn to him. It made his body feel full and he wanted that. He was hungry, really hungry, and he felt something he never felt before, greed. Why did he feel greedy? Why? Izuku ignored the nagging thoughts that doubted his new feelings, not liking that he almost stopped himself from getting his own pleasure. Letting his body draw in that warm fuzzy feeling, Izuku felt like he was on cloud nine. Izuku heard Momo yelp and shudder, but continued as he ignored everything else. Then there it was, he fully grasped on the new feeling. He felt a wave of power and exhilaration. The trio walked to Principal Nedzu's office, called because of the incident. Even though Momo was now quirkless, she didn't blame him for something he couldn't control. Izuku apologized so many times, and even groveled for forgiveness, despite the fact that she already forgave him. "Principal Nedzu," Izuku knocked. They heard some scuffling the moment he knocked. Waiting for a response, they heard, "Please come in." As they entered and sat on the 3 open seats, they noticed a skinny, messy, blonde-haired man in the corner. Melissa noticed how he was seething. She couldn't help but be concerned and wonder what happened. Izuku waited for Nedzu to finish sipping his tea and felt a trickle of sweat go down his neck during the quiet atmosphere. The principal set down his tea on its coaster with the sound of a clat, making Izuku even more nervous. The animal sighed and set his elbows on the desk, leaning his head on his paws. "Do you want to explain what exactly happened?" Nedzu said. I stole Yaoyorozu's quirk," Izuku gasped out, with his head facing down and his hands on thighs, almost like he was bowing. Waiting for a response, Izuku peeked through his curly bangs, looking for any reaction, be it anger, fear, pity, or even absolute rage. What surprised him was that Nedzu only pinched the bridge of his nose. Izuku's mouth formed and, oh, it seemed that he wasn't specific enough. I got this feeling of fuzziness, warmth. Something like that. I wanted that feeling. I thought it was hunger of not eating, but it wasn't hunger. After I took her quirk, I saw strings on different other people, I think they represent people's quirks. But I didn't mean to. I only felt it when I thought I was still hungry for food, Izuku tried to explain. Oh, it's definitely hunger alright, Toshinori muttered as he crossed his arms and gritted his teeth, thankfully only Nedzu heard due to his enhanced hearing as an animal. The headmaster coughed into his paw and motioned for Izuku to breathe. Izuku let out a breath he didn't even know he was holding, mentally thanking Nedzu. I believe this was an accident, no, he said as he got the boy to nod. Nedzu sighed and cleared his throat. You know what this means, right? Izuku drowned in the dramatic silence he let on. It means more training and seeing if we can get you to give young Yaoyorozo's quirk back. He weakly nodded. Now, I believe Recovery Girl would like to perform some tests. The two of you shall accompany Izuku to her office. Once Aizawa gets here I want to discuss some things. You're dismissed, he finished. The three of them obeyed and made their way to the youthful heroine's office. Aizawa considers himself to be a calm and collected man that acts rationally, but there is one anomaly to this nature, an individual who could single-handedly make him lose his cool, and that was his son. He was supposed to pick him up after school and come back to Ua to find out the reasons behind his uncanny developments. His quirks were already one of a kind and its growing complexity was starting to him off. The look he saw on Izuku's face when he dropped him off to school was enough to make his rational side go away, but he held his head and went through with it. And now he was regretting his decision. He was teaching his class, when Namari barged in. At first he was going to throw her out, but when he saw her expression, he paled. This rare expression of concern was dedicated to only one being, and that meant, something happened with Izuku. Without a single thought he ran out of his class, leaving them dumbfounded. He only heard some faint words which just made his movement faster. Nedzu picked Izuku from school, and Izuku stole. Aizawa was pacing his way to Nedzu's office while he heard some familiar muttering coming from the nurse's room. Thinking of the worst, he busted in, startling all the occupants. He sighed in relief as he saw Izuku was physically looking fine. Trying his best to keep his composure he was about to voice his inquiries, but Recovery Girl interjected. Aizawa, Principal Nedzu had called you in his office. You should not keep him waiting. Yes, Recovery Girl, but first I want to know, are you fine, Izuku? And what happened? Are you sick? Did someone hurt you? I was supposed to pick you up after a couple of hours, then what was the emergency? Was there a villain attack? I need to get those two The occupants saw Aizawa mutter over his son and they couldn't help but smile. While Izuku was having a déjà vu, and he was definitely seeing some of his mom in Aizawa today, if he wasn't in such a pinch, he would have cried his heart out and hugged him with all his might. Why yes Dad, I am fine. Aizawa recognized that stutter. He was so darn angry at whoever was responsible to bring that side of his son back. Who dared. Still the rational side came and took control soon enough. Izuku. Explain. Now, he questioned as he ignored Chiyo's demands to visit Nedzu. Why, you remember earlier today, I told you I was having these visions, kind of like the dream and everything. Aizawa simply nodded and motioned him to continue. Yeah, we were eating lunch when they happened again. The feeling of being in that void again, and then suddenly the hunger grew. It was almost controllable, but something in me just wanted to let go. Momo was sitting beside me, and as my palm touched her skin, I had her quirk. In fact, I can now see strings in people. They are distinct for each and I just have to tug on them to take them. Aizawa was bewildered. He knew Momo won't go feral just because her quirk was stolen, so there must be more to the story. Melissa felt it would be appropriate if she'd said something. When he had her quirk, he tried to use it and some weird goop came out. It happens when the process of creation is not done right. Things were under control until then, and Izuku was about to try to give it back when a guy from a different section shouted that he and Izuku have the same quirk. Aizawa was now in utter shock. He knew about the power of All for One, the quirk that allows a person to steal other quirks. The idea of not one but two people in the whole world with the said power was horrifying. Momo interjected, I don't know his name, but he has some sort of copy quirk and likes to brag how his class is better than ours. When he found that I was unable to use my quirk, he spread the commotion and caused panic in the cafeteria, shouting that Izuku is sorry for my language, but a freak with a villainous power and would steal all of their quirks. The word got around, and before the recess could finish, the teachers were upon us. That's when Mother called Principal Nedzu, and now we're here. Aizawa sighed. As he comprehended the information, he realized that Melissa was here, so Toshinori would have picked them up. He paled yet again. Yagi's stigma to that man and the quirk was not good for Izuku right now, so he asked the million-dollar question, "Izuku, can you return the quirk you took?" "Yes, Dad. We were just waiting for my test results and I connected my palm to Momo. I can feel the emptiness inside and the ability to push as well as pull quirks, so I pushed and Momo had her quirk back." Izuku smiled. Aizawa was so glad that he didn't lose his smile, even in the situation he was in. Aizawa ruffled Izuku's hair and complied with Recovery Girl's constant requests to visit Nedzu. He was outside Nedzu's room when some light argument seemed to be taking place inside. The door flew wide open, revealing an annoyed Aizawa. "Mind telling me what you both are arguing for?" Aizawa said, making them glad that they have someone else to sway into their judgment. As always, Nedzu took charge. "Well, you see, we aren't sure what to do with young Izuku, with the whole new adjustment he has now." Toshinori fumbled with his hands as he pulled out a handkerchief to wipe off the blood he had from arguing. The raven-haired man sighed. "Are you talking about Izuku stealing a quirk?" "You know about that." "How?" Toshinori said as he spat out blood. Aizawa only sighed. "They were being loud in the infirmary. I swear, one would think that they are anime characters." He shook his head. Aizawa stepped aside, revealing the three tired kids. "Let's get this over with." The things were getting chaotic, so Aizawa felt like a summary was in order, hence he began. "Alright, let me get this straight. You felt horn. Pleasured and hungry. Same thing, you felt a tug and you pulled. That happened to be Yaoyorozu's quirk, which you returned from your possession," Aizawa summarized. "Please don't be mad, sir," Momo said, standing up for her male friend. "I know that it sounds bad, bu," she stuttered as soon as the man motioned her to stop. "I'm not mad, it's just, how are we going to explain this to your parents? Besides, more training for Izuku, again. You are such a problem child," the very poor and tired man said as he rubbed his face. Izuku, fearing that he might have disappointed his dad, spoke up, I'm sorry, Dad. I saw the string and I pulled it. I didn't know wha." String. Nedzu perked up, as he never heard from anyone describing quirks as strings. "Yeah, I think it represents a quirk. Kinda like you and you," Izuku said, confused as to why his blonde best friend didn't have one. Izuku looked to where Momo stood. "When I saw her, she didn't have one, but now, she has a string, obviously, now that I returned her quirk, but Melissa," he thought. "Melissa, are you quirkless? And why does that man have 7 strings?" narrowing his eyes to the somewhat abnormal people in the room. Toshinori and Melissa paled. They knew that their secret is out in the open now and they'd have to do something about it. Aizawa noticed the turn of emotions on Toshinori's face from slight anger to intense horror. Before he could take any rash decisions, he called out to him. "Yagi, let's talk." Toshinori nodded and left the room with Aizawa in tow. 30 minutes after the two adults left the room, they re-entered with content looks. As the office fell silent, Nedzu gave Toshinori the final nudge that he needed. He suddenly inflated into his heroic form, startling the two teens, while Nedzu and Aizawa grinned as Melissa sighed in relief. "I am here to explain." Not trusting their words, they just stared in shock as All Might continued. Preparations. Part 1. 30 minutes earlier, before the reveal of OFA, Aizawa, with Toshinori in tow, entered a small room attached to the principal's office. He knew the look on Toshinori's face when his quirk was mentioned. It was fairly recent, but since he was in on the secret of All Might's quirk and his son will soon also be, Aizawa needed to work with some prerequisites before he could let All Might confront Izuku. "Alright, now, let's speak," Aizawa said as they sat opposite to one another. All Might was still uncomfortable about this whole ordeal, but he knew he can't let a 13-year-old run around telling people that the symbol of peace has 7 quirks. That was still confusing to All Might, but he mused that they would be the remnant of the past holder's quirks. "Aizawa, you know how dangerous a fully capable all-for-one can be. I don't think I need to show you the hole in my stomach again to prove that." Shota shot him his quirk-induced glare that shook Toshinori to his very core. "Toshinori Yagi, compare my son to that man, even call him by that name again, and people will be mourning for their beloved symbol of peace in no time." All Might, while scared to death, still got the sentiment Aizawa was sharing. He was comparing his son to a vile evil. The comparison didn't sit well with him either, but the pit in his stomach said otherwise. Which is kinda ironic, there's barely any stomach left. By yours truly, Editor Kun. Aizawa, I know what you must be feeling, and to be honest, young Izuku is a very honest boy and I truly would never like to see him descend the path of villainy, but I think this matter should be discussed. You just heard his hunger for quirks. What would happen when one day he might not be able to control his urge, and I am quoting you his own words, and he decides to let go. Aizawa's non-rational side was begging to come on the surface and beat the ever-loving out of All Might for even thinking that his little Izuku will even consider going down the path of villain, but decided otherwise to save that for later and take this matter like professionals they are. I have known Izuku for the longest time, and I can assure you he will never tend to villainy, just to satisfy personal urges. He idolizes you, you big oaf. Do you know how many times he has watched that freaking debut videos of yours? I lost count at about 3,987, so before you do something that we'll all regret, try taking the matter at hand and deal with it rationally. And for the hunger part, I am not sure, but have you heard of our newest recruited teacher? Here, his name is Vlad King. Aizawa saw Toshinori looked perplexed but listening intently and continued. Apparently he has a blood-related quirk, and he also shows a similar urge or hunger for the intake of blood. He said it's overwhelming but easily manageable, and before you say quirks and blood are different, we have Tartarus for a reason. All Might's eyes widened when the realization hit him. Young Izuku can take quirks from prisoners for his hunger, and can also potentially strengthen heroes. It was such an ingenious solution. And with the original All for One gone, they had no reason for him to come looking for a successor. It was a win-win situation. Yes, that is quite the solution, Aizawa, but okay. Aizawa had enough now. If his next words are anything against my little Izuku, he's not leaving this room in one piece. To his surprise, All Might just slightly chucked. If I am being honest with myself, for my trauma from that man had not flared up, I would be so happy for young Izuku. I have never told anyone this, but what happened out there did not make me angry in the slightest. I was just conflicted. The boy already reminds me of my master, the purple aura, the floating but the most recognizable quality, his smile. Maybe it's finally time when All for One and One for All exist together in harmony. Aizawa gave a sigh of relief, while Toshinori was on the verge of weeping. Now, I believe we have made them wait long enough. It would be best we come clean and explain the two teens. And before you protest, again, Momo has earned the right to know, and you know as well as I do that the girl is smart and will not spill the secret. I think you're right. Come on, let's get this over with. Toshinori buffed up and left the room with Aizawa present. You see, the true name of my power is One for All. All Might stood with his signature smile before two flabbergasted teens. He was about to entrust the two with his deepest secret. The muscle form was already straining his body and he didn't want to power through the explanation, so he buffed down and spat out some blood, scaring the teens. Ah, it's normal, you don't need to worry. Listen closely, both of you, and this goes without saying that this does not leave the room. Aizawa calmed the two down while grabbing their shoulders. Izuku and Momo were shocked by the revelation and silently nodded. Now, the tabloids like to guess that it's super strength or some kind of enhancement quirk. When they ask in interviews, I avoid them by making jokes, because All Might, the symbol of peace, has to come off as a natural-born hero. Toshinori tried to flex with his almost meatless arms. Peace drama queen, Aizawa thought. But my quirk, it was passed down to me, like the Olympic torch. Izuku's analytical brain was intrigued. Hold on a second. All the other occupants had the same thought. Ah, here we go again. And thus the muttering spree commenced. To be sure, All Might's quirk is one of the 7 greatest mysteries of the world, and there's been endless debate over what it might be. There isn't a day goes by without some new theory on the internet. But well, now, he says it was passed down to him. Naturally, I have no idea what that means. But more than that, that's not even a theory anyone's proposed before. And that's because we still know so little about what quirks really are in the first place. I mean, we use the term quirks to begin with because each power or characteristic is so very particular to a single person. The idea of passing down one's quirk doesn't make any sense to me, unless you're talking about heritage. I mean, mutter. Wow, He's really taking the whole, transferring, quirk thing, well. And that's to say when his quirk can do the same thing if not even more. Nedzu took a sip of his tea, comprehending all the muttering little Izuku was throwing around. Aizawa once thought before his son had some brain damage, he should probably do something, but Melissa beat him to it. Izuku, snap out of it, and let him explain. That seemed to work, as the resident brunette was back in reality, looking dumbfounded to all the occupants. Glad to see you're with us again, young Izuku, Toshinori chuckled. Now then, as I was saying, then his face turned serious as he took out his palm. I have the ability to transfer my quirk to someone else, and that's just one facet of my secret abilities. The true name of my power is One for All. The two teens, still shocked, unconsciously mouthed, One for All, looking like some fish begging for food. The first person cultivates the power, and then passes it to another. The next refines it and hands it off to another person. In this way, those crying out to be saved and those with brave and true hearts link to form a crystalline network of power. Momo took in every word Toshinori was saying and noticed that Melissa seemed to be already aware of this information. She put two and two together. And now you are planning to give to Melissa. Aw, smart as always, young Momo, and since you two are her best friends, we decided to entrust you with this information as well. Toshinori coughed. And for your earlier question, young Izuku, as of now, Melissa is indeed quirkless. She first have to mold her body into a proper vessel first. And the part where you said I have 7 strings, it might be the remnants or the previous wielder's quirks. In fact, I am the 8th user of this ancient power. Izuku was somehow satisfied with the information that was being dropped on him, but he noticed that when All Might told them about Melissa's quirklessness, her mood dropped and that didn't sit well with him. That's so cool, Melissa. You are gonna have All Might's power with you, you're gonna level cities. We'll all be the strongest heroes together. Yay, Melissa, you have both of us on your side, we'll be there if you need anything, now cheer up. All the adults in the room were so proud and didn't regret their decision in the slightest. While Melissa was happily tearing up, she shot herself at the two and hugged them with all her might. Closing parenthesis. The secret of One for All was out, the teens seemed to be taking it too well. Then the door flew open, revealing a horrified recovery girl. She came silently and presented Nedzu with some files. Oh, this is worrying indeed. Listen everyone, here I have young Izuku's test results and I would like Chio to explain them herself. Recovery girl still looked pale, but nodded and began. I have performed various tests, and it seems that All for One is seemed to be causing more damage to his body. Wait, my quirk's name is All for One. Hey Melissa, it's so cool, it seems my quirk and your soon-to-be quirk are kind of related. Melissa just blushed and gave him a warm smile. Yes, and let me finish, Izuku. Now, there are some things that can leave you stumped, but bear with me. It seems that Izuku's second quirk is indeed All for One, he can take and give quirks. But it seems that the awakening of the said quirk has worsened the pre-existing cellular degradation. His cells are dying at a much faster pace to which his cell activation could regenerate. Incidentally, I also found that the cell activation is one of the quirks in All for One. That means young Izuku wasn't born with it, rather acquired. All eyes apart from one's were dead set on Izuku. Before the could break loose, Aizawa chimed in. Stop making assumptions, Nedzu and Chio, you should already know that when we first brought Izuku here, he already had that quirk. Nedzu hummed and the occupants visibly relaxed. Recovery girl, keeping her composure, continued. Yes, I just wanted to inform you that young Izuku seemed to have reawakened his second quirk, and dare I say it, All Might, his All for One is like your One for All in more than a few ways. You see, the quirk is seemed to be taking this toll on Izuku's body because his body is not accustomed to his own quirk yet. For One for All, as All Might previously said, the user's body must be molded into a proper vessel. It's because power from all the users had been stockpiled in that quirk and can be too much for an unprepared body to handle. In this case, however, Izuku seems to have already something stored in All for One. Perhaps more quirks. We can't do deeper into that research as the previously mentioned biological firewall is still preventing it. The quirk is acting like it's too much for his brain to process right now. As in case of One for All, the bones of the body detonate for an unprepared body. It seems for All for One, its targets are the cells. To put it simply, his software seems to exceed the limits of his current hardware. The room fell silent. Okay, Then we need to prepare young Izuku's body quite similar to what I had planned for young Melissa to acquire my quirk, yes. Nedzu, who had read the files, looked at the recovery girl who just nudged him to speak as it was already too much for her. That seems to be the problem, Toshinori. From now on we have little to no time in bringing young Izuku's body to the desired level, as he soon will lose his mobility along with his several physical capabilities. What? They all shouted in unison. Let me finish. Recovery girl found that young Izuku's first quirk, which we deemed to be weather manipulation, is fused with another quirk, whose function is still unknown, but we do know its drawback seems to be causing young Izuku to lose his overall mobility. At this rate, Izuku will not be able to run at all by the time he's 15, he might be able to walk but not at a significant pace. Izuku's heart dropped. How could he become a hero if he lost his physical capabilities? His world was crumbling, he felt cold like the tiny ray of hope was slipping through his hand, but if Izuku has all for one, can't he transfer that quirk and be done with it? Aizawa asked as he put a comforting hand on Izuku's shoulder. Nedzu's expression fell. No, I believe not. Since his first quirk is not a part of All for One, I don't believe he could transfer that. Izuku was almost on the verge of weeping, but he couldn't give up yet. He won't. He had promised his mother he'd be the greatest hero, and knows Izuku always keeps his promises. He kissed his ruby locket and stood up. When can we start, All Might? All Might beamed with pride and buffed up. The sooner the better, young Izuku. Momo was happy that her friend was still motivated for his goal, but she thought this should be addressed. Excuse me, but what are we going to do about Izuku's hunger for quirks? Ah yes, tell me, young Izuku, can you control this urge of yours? Nedzu perked up. I couldn't back then, but now that I know it's there, it seems manageable. It gets sort of difficult if I think about someone's quirk in depth. Like when All Might was explaining his quirk, a part of me wanted to take it, but I was able to keep it under control. Aizawa and Toshinori nodded at each other and the former spoke up. That's good. As for actually helping you with obtaining quirks, it's actually quite simple. We're going to have you take the quirks of criminals, death row inmates, or those with life sentences. In this way you are both helping society by removing the quirks of dangerous people who should not have such powers, while also providing you for your own. However, we'll only take one for now and see how your body reacts to it. Izuku was excited that he'll get to help the society before he even gets into a hero school, and for the part where he'll get to keep more quirks. Quirks, I say. Yes, that is the rational way of moving forward, Aizawa. Let me make a few calls and we can schedule the meeting later today. I'll give you a couple of options to choose from and let young Izuku decide. Nedzu beamed as he called the chief of police for his assistance. It seemed things were starting to look up for Izuku. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After a couple of hours of the meeting, Momo bid them farewell and went home as her parents received a call from the school and were starting to get worried. Melissa and Izuku were sitting in the teacher's lounge with a deflated All Might while Aizawa went back to teaching his last class of the day. An hour later, Nedzu, recovery girl, and Aizawa walked into the teacher's lounge, finding Toshinori motioning them to stay quiet. Looking around the room, they discovered Melissa's head resting on Izuku's shoulder and his on her head, both sleeping in peace. All of the odd, even Aizawa's heart melted enough that he snapped several pictures in his phone, probably to embarrass the duo when they woke up. None of them wanted to wake them up, but this was necessary and they were already behind the schedule. Aizawa tapped Izuku's shoulder a couple of times until he was awake and started blushing furiously at the position he was in. He tried to move out of Melissa's grasp, but caught the same reaction from her in the process. Ahem, now that you two lovebirds are awake, Nedzu scheduled the meeting and we gotta get going to Tartarus. Both teens gasped, ignoring the first part entirely because of the fact that they were going to the highest security prison in all of Japan. Then all the previous events came rushing back and things started to make sense. Yes, we are already late for the meeting, so you should get there as soon as possible. And before you ask, young Izuku, there are 3 quirks that you can choose from, but pick wisely as you won't be getting more anytime soon. I won't be disclosing them now, as Tsukauchi might be able to explain their usage and origin in much better detail. Taking their cue, Izuku, Aizawa, Melissa and Toshinori set course for Tartarus in All Might's beat-up station wagon. After like the 5th security check and the constant questioning of why a pair of 13-year-olds were with heroes in such a place, they found Tsukauchi waiting for them outside an interrogation room. Tsukauchi just gave the pair a nod and greeted them. "Hey Uncle Tsukauchi, how's it been? It's been a while since you last visited." Izuku beamed. "Hey Izuku, yeah, I am sorry about that, the work has me swamped." Naomasa chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head. Melissa was utterly confused at how Izuku knew the detective. She was aware that he was very secretive about his past. The only information he let out in all this time was the fact that he was adopted by Mr. Aizawa when he was at the age of 5, and the locket that he always has around his neck contains a ruby that's his mother's last memory. She mused as she made a mental note to ask him about this later. Tsukauchi pulled out 3 files. "Now onto business. Nedzu told me to pick out the following quirks. First one, metal manipulation emitter. It's owned by a villain known by the name Wolfram. The quirk allows the user to freely reshape and manipulate metallic material upon making physical contact with its surface. He is charged with several heists and murders. Second one, transforming arms. Emitter. It's owned by a villain with name Elongate. Allows its user to shape-shift their arms, that includes elastically stretching long distances as well as splitting them. She is charged with bank robbery, crippling multiple hostages, and illegal quirk usage. Third one, as soon as he was about to explain the last quirk, Tsukauchi's phone rang. "Please excuse me, it's Nedzu." 5 minutes later, detective was off the call. "Sorry about that, but Nedzu has asked me to give you only these 2 options. Apparently he has something else planned for the third one." Izuku was left dumbfounded, but he was still grateful that he was getting this opportunity. He thought it up and decided, "I will go with metal manipulation, Uncle Tsukauchi." Aizawa knew exactly why his son had made that choice while Melissa was about to ask for his reasoning, but All Might beat her to it. "Can I ask you why so young Midoriya? And to be frank, the elongating limbs quirk seems quite powerful to me. If you pair it up for a strength enhancement 1, which I am sure you will be able to obtain down the line." "I agree All Might, but you see, with what Recovery Girl told me that I will be losing my physical capabilities, it seemed wise for me to change my fighting style. Rather than being a brawler, I must gather quirks that have long-range capabilities. Plus with what little information I got to gather from the description of the said quirk, it came off as a pretty similar quirk to Smintas-sensei, and thus will help me learn it better from a skilled individual." Toshinori and Melissa hummed, somewhat satisfied by Izuku's reasoning. "So how are we doing this?" Izuku asked inquisitively. "He is bound and gagged to protect your identity. Just walk in and take it as soon as you are ready." The detective held the door open for them and motioned for them to enter. Izuku saw a man in the standard orange jumpsuit used by most prisons with a black bag over his head and cuffs on his hands. Izuku walked up and hesitantly raised his hand toward the person. The detective then looked at All Might, then back to Izuku. Tsukauchi was admittedly uneasy with this whole setup. He knew Izuku for a long time, but he really didn't think loading up a potential new all-for-one with more and more powerful quirks was a good idea, but he had to trust Nedzu on this. Tsukauchi did however have to admit being able to permanently remove the quirks of inmates would make transporting them so much easier, and he can potentially strengthen heroes too. Izuku finally touched the handcuffed man on his uncovered forearm, and that was that. He felt the new quirk flew into him. "Everything all right, Izuku?" Aizawa asked in concern. To his surprise, Izuku beamed with happiness. "Yes Dad. I feel great, like really great." Tsukauchi remembered something that he needed to inform them. "That's great Izuku, but I may tell you that Recovery Girl said that you must keep it overnight and use it only when you are on UA grounds. Can I trust you with that?" "Yes Uncle Tsukauchi." He saluted as everyone chuckled at his antics. Soon everyone made their way home, happy that today was a productive day and also quite tired. The next day Izuku was ecstatic about finding out all about his new quirk. He and Aizawa drove to UA, finding All Might and Melissa being already there. They all greeted one another and Izuku was taken in for some more testing by Recovery Girl. An hour of testing later, they were in a similar situation. Recovery Girl had the same worried expression on her face while Nedzu was going through the files. She began, "I have some good news and some bad news. The latter is that the quirk Izuku acquired yesterday seemed to be well settled in his body, but when he uses that quirk, the cell deterioration worsened, so as of now, he would have to get rid of that quirk." But on the flip side, it's confirmed that if he trains his body in the little time that he has left with his mobility, he will be able to handle the backlash of his quirk by the time he enters UA. Izuku found that his happiness was short-lived. The quirk he got just yesterday, which he had just used twice, had to be let go. Then he had an idea. That's alright, recovery girl. I do have my own quirk, and if I can't have this quirk, can I give it to Dad? Aizawa and Melissa were astonished, while the other occupants, especially All Might, were confused as to why the boy wasn't sad about the fact that he was losing his precious quirk. The real All for One would never do such a thing. Young Izuku is really different. Toshinori mused. But why me, Izuku? Didn't you say that Smintas's quirk is quite similar to this? Wouldn't he be able to make better use of it? You are not entirely wrong, but I kind of tested him yesterday afternoon, and it turns out I can tell if a person can handle an extra quirk or quirks or not. Seeing the confused faces, he continued. When I connect my palm with another person's skin, I can sense this emptiness, and depending on the space a string can take, I can tell if the said person can handle that quirk or not. And when I tested Smintas-sensei, he couldn't, but there is another reason too. A while ago when Melissa and Momo visited us, your capture cloth caught Momo's attention, and she found that it's a metal alloy, so I think this quirk will suit you well. Aizawa's eyes widened. He gave him a warm smile and ruffled his hair. Just know this, Izuku, I am grateful that you are willing to lend me this, and when you are ready, feel free to take it from me. Izuku stuck out his hand as Aizawa shook it. He sensed the string leaving his body and entering Shota's. Wonderful, Izuku, I want you to know I am very proud of you, and since we are cut short on time, I would like to discuss with Aizawa and Toshinori about your plans involving the training of Izuku and Melissa. Melissa and Izuku both looked at each other and nodded. Excuse me, Nedzu-san, but can we please include Momo in our training too? I mean, she might not have to bulk up like us, but we both need to learn close combat techniques, and who is better at it than Eraserhead? Melissa pleaded. It's fine, after all she is in on both of your secrets. Incidentally, if I had failed to mention, but both All for One and One for All must remain secret for your safety as well as your loved ones. Both of the teens nodded in understanding. Toshinori buffed up and pulled out 2 sheets and presented them to Izuku and Melissa. I have rediscovered a place that goes by Dagoba Municipal Beach. It used to be a beautiful place back in my day, but it's been a total mess now. You two will clean the entire coastline of the beach. It will be your first task towards being a hero. Here, I had taken the liberty of forming an aim to pass American Dream Plan. Both of your schedules are made with your respective body in mind, so that your progress wouldn't be swift but manageable. Izuku and Melissa were going through the plan when Melissa understood the reason behind this task. Okay, so this whole beach cleaning thing would be like a hardcore gym workout. Nice. Aizawa chimed in. Yes, Melissa, and for your earlier request, on the beach I'll be teaching you and Momo some close combat fighting techniques and ways to improve your agility. Nedzu summed up. So it all boils down to this: Izuku and Melissa would be training their bodies with All Might. Then Melissa and Momo will be training with Aizawa to learn close combat fighting techniques. And as for me, you and young Yaoyorozu are allowed to come to UA and train your quirks alongside Izuku. Yes. Both teens shouted in unison. Now, get rest for the rest of the day, you'll not be getting much in the foreseeable future. Aizawa grinned, as he exited the room, while Izuku and Melissa shivered. Maybe asking for Mr. Aizawa as our trainer wasn't one of my smartest decisions, Melissa thought. Preparations. Part 2. Izuku, Melissa and Momo stood before what could only be described as a junkyard, glancing a little further at the 2 silhouettes of a deflated symbol of peace and a very tired pro. The former waving his hands indicating that their presence had been acknowledged. Izuku and Melissa caught Momo up with the plans they had for their training and the developments that took place once she had gone to her home. She was surprised to hear that Izuku had to let go of his newly acquired quirk due to the toll All for One was taking on his body, but was glad that her precious friend wasn't giving in to his desires when he gave the quirk to his father without a moment of hesitation. Looking at the uncanny resemblance between All Might's and Izuku's quirk's names, she suspected there were more to the backstory than All Might led them on, but stayed quiet for the time being. She was also quite baffled when Nedzu informed them that Izuku had to be taken out of the school due to the incident that had happened. If not, it could risk spilling the secret about Izuku's second quirk. Momo understood his reasoning for such action, and once discussing it over with Melissa, both of them convinced Nezu to take them out with Izuku as well. Her mother was at first against her decision, but with Nezu's approval she relented. Nezu took it upon himself to tutor the three individuals for the rest of their middle school education, which according to him was a one-week task. And now here they were ready to embark upon their journey towards becoming heroes in training. All Might buffed up and beamed at the teens. Good morning. I hope you all are excited for today. There was a slight change in plans. Rather than an extension, I thought the trash on this beach would have been enough to bring young Melissa's as well as young Izuku's body to the desired level. But it seems I have been wrong. Incidentally, I happen to have these 3 gym passes. He presented them with shiny cards with their names on it. While our main goal is to clear this beach in 6 months, you, 3, will continue to work on your bodies using this gymnasium. Aizawa was already half regretting this. It was way too early to be this cheery. Still, he pushed past those feelings and confronted the teens. Alright, now, to begin with, Momo and Melissa, we will work on your endurance and agility for the first couple of weeks. Melissa, don't think just because you are doing both that I'll be going easy on you. As heroes, you'll have to push past your limits. Now, as for you Izuku, since we can't just have you push trash all day, you'll be going to UA regularly to work on your quirk. Find more useful ways to use your quirk. It's versatility that provides you with more than you need at the moment, so think smart. And to all of you, he formed with the biggest eating grin, just hope you survive. And so they began their training. It was downright brutal, especially for Melissa, who was cleaning the beaches while training with Aizawa-sensei. One day when Izuku was cleaning alone with Toshinori to supervise him while Melissa and Momo were being tortured by Eraserhead. The deflated All Might had a couple of things on his mind, a bit troubling, so he decided to ask them head on. Young Izuku, can I ask you a couple of questions? It's something that's been bugging me right from the start. Oh sure, go ahead. All Might Sensei. All Might basically cooed at that title. Melissa told me that you don't like to talk about your past, but if it's not much trouble, can you tell me a little bit about your parents and their quirks? Izuku looked saddened and small tears were forming themselves in his eyes. All Might backpedaled. Oh dear, it's alright young Izuku, you don't have to tell me, I am sorry. No, you shared your deepest secret with me, it's the least I can do. Toshinori knew if Aizawa found out he was the cause of this stuttering he might not return home today, but the kid was pushing himself, so he encouraged him to continue. My father used to work abroad. I don't remember where and what he does, but he died in a car accident here in Japan when I was 2 years old. I have no memory of him, just a couple of pictures. And the things mom used to tell me about him. His Q quirk was fire breath, which is pretty self-explanatory. He took a deep breath and prepared himself for the next part. Izuku was weeping. Toshinori put a comforting hand on his shoulder and hummed. My mother. Her quirk was attraction, a weak telekinetic quirk. She could attract small objects to her hands. Used to be a lawyer, but gave up her practice when I was born. She was the sweetest person. I may have little memories of her, but I cherish every single one of them. And 8 years back when my quirk came in, Izuku continued between sobbing, killed her. Toshinori had heard about this incident from Aizawa, and deeply regretted his decision about asking such details from him. It still intrigued him as to how the kid ended up with All for One. I am sorry young Izuku, but Aizawa told me about the incident, and to be honest it seemed like an accident. He took a pause as Izuku didn't seem to acknowledge that statement. I know it could never make up for what you have been through, but I have a favor to ask of you. I am going to tell you something that should not reach Melissa, not until she's ready. Izuku kept his composure, intently focused, and nodded. It's related to your quirk. You see, at the dawn of quirks, there was utter chaos. The government was busy making laws with quirks in mind, and people were succumbing to anarchy, using their quirks as they wanted. In such a time, power decides a person's place in society. Around that time, there were 2 brothers. Hence accidentally All for One gave rise to One for All. Ironic, isn't it? Izuku pinched the bridge of his nose as he comprehended the origin of his and All Might's quirk, already forming a headache. But why don't you want Melissa knowing this? She deserves to know how her soon-to-be quirk came to be. Toshinori sighed. Well young Izuku, All for One, the person, was the reason I got this scar. He lifted up his shirt and showed his distorted stomach. I got this from fighting him 4 years ago, and I seem to have killed him. As a result, I have little time left as the symbol of peace. I don't want to burden her, but there is a slight possibility he might have survived the battle. As we didn't found a body, we suspect that a follower might have taken to keep it as his shrine, but we can't say for sure. And one day he might come after you and Melissa. You both have quirks he had longed for, and for that I want you to be by Melissa's side, as I won't be able to. I am sorry, young Izuku, for burden." Before he could finish the sentence, Toshinori was tackled by a tight hug from a teary-eyed Izuku. "I will always be there for both of you, and if the time comes, I'll be fight and bring him down. No matter what." All Might rustled Izuku's hair and let some tears fall from his side too. "I am so proud of you, young Izuku. I knew I won't regret trusting you, Izuku. I am sure you have and will continue to make your mother proud." All Might wiped Izuku's face and buffed up. "Now let's go beyond together." They both shouted in unison, plus ultra. All Might wanted to ask about Izuku's reason for keeping his last name, but he kept that to himself for the time being and got to training young Midoriya. It was not lost to anybody that even while training, Izuku would keep his necklace on him, and only Aizawa was aware of its importance for the time being. The hellish 10 months were over and they had 6 months left to prepare for their UA entrance exam. At this point the beach was spotless, and consequently, both Melissa's and Izuku's bodies were almost on the desired level. Melissa was ready to accept her quirk, the tool that'll help reach her goal, the moment she'd been waiting for her whole life. It was only her on the beach and was also done with the outer section. She climbed up the pile of junk and yet out a victory yell. She yelled out all her frustrations, all her doubts about herself, and every other negative emotion she had bottled up inside. All Might came out of his station wagon and made his way to the beach. "Well, there's not a speck of trash left. Amazing." Young Izuku completed his section a while ago, but his was much smaller, not to mention the gym workouts were doing wonders for the kid, so Melissa had most of the beach to herself, but this is outstanding. She even cleared the outside area I told her to avoid. Wow. She made it in time and exceeded my expectations. Holy stinking. All Might buffed mid-sentence and exclaimed, "Super." He rushed and caught the exhausted Melissa and placed her before him. "Uncle Might. We did it, I did it." Melissa skipped and tried to keep her balance. She took a minute to look at herself. She looked stunning, all the baby fat was gone, just pure toned muscle. She felt great. All Might beamed with pride. "Excellent work, young Melissa. The path forward is ever so slightly clearer. But you are a true blue vessel now." Melissa smiled as tears started flowing down her face. She looked down at her hand and sobbed. "Feels like I have cheated though, getting all this help from you, Aizawa-sensei, Izuku, and Momo. I have been blessed." All Might just laughed. "She's wrong, this is because of her own hard work. Seems like young Izuku's habits are rubbing off you. Now quit being a crybaby." Melissa chuckled awkwardly. "Now for your award ceremony, young Melissa." All Might gracefully plucked a strand of hair from his golden locks and held it in front of him. "Someone told me once, there is a difference between being lucky and deserving. One is an accident, the other a reward. Never get the two confused. Take this to heart, kid. You have earned this gift with your own valiant efforts." All Might saw the pure conviction and determination in Melissa's eyes. He proudly continued, as he presented the aforementioned strand to her. "Eat this." Melissa blanked as she stared at the golden strand of hair. "Say what? For the transfer you gotta ingest some of my DNA. That's how it works. Don't worry, I shampooed them thoroughly before coming here. You like strawberries, yes?" Melissa awkwardly took and reluctantly swallowed the thing. It was oddly gross but tasteful at the same time. Gordon Ramsay does not approve. "That was gross, Uncle Might, but thanks for the flavoring. Don't mention it." "So, now what?" she asked, inspecting that nothing felt different. "We have to let your body process the hair first, then we can go for a test drive. It's good that we have 6 months before the entrance exam. We can practice plenty and get you accustomed to your quirk." Melissa couldn't describe the feeling when she heard Toshinori saying the last part, but chirped happily. A couple of hours had passed since the transfer and it seemed that Melissa was ready to try out her new quirk. She was escorted to UA along with Momo and Aizawa, who arrived soon after the ceremony and did their routine exercises. Toshinori was already at UA discussing his upcoming tenure at the institution, and Izuku was on his weekly testing with Recovery Girl. All of them except Izuku arrived at the field and began their first test drive with Melissa's new quirk. Aizawa and Momo were watching from a distance and a buffed-up Toshinori was helping Melissa activate One for All. Alright young Melissa, you have to prepare yourself before using this quirk, so I want you to clench your butt cheeks and yell out smash. In the nurse's office, recovery girl sighed, my idiot senses are tingling. Melissa nodded and obeyed All Might's advice and imagined how he used this quirk. She clenched her fist and felt the unfamiliar power rushing through her arm. Her arm glowed with red veins forming all over. Soon it was too much pressure to bear and she yelled out smash, swinging a full power punch towards the empty field. Ah! Utter destruction. Izuku came out of the building to see the total demolition of his beloved field he had grown with and the person who had done it. Melissa was limping on All Might with a purple broken scratch that destroyed arm, and descended into unconsciousness due to the severity of the pain. In a couple of minutes she was in Archie's office and Izuku was glaring at the deflated Toshinori. How? Melissa was firing her first punch with her quirk and the power seemed to be too much for her body, Momo informed, but Izuku seemed unfazed by her explanation. How? Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. Her body can't control the full extent of her quirk yet, but at least we know the transfer happened successfully. How? Taking his cue, All Might began. We were at the field when I asked her to clench her butt cheeks and fire off a smash, and her arm glowed with these red veins and then. Hold up, you what? Izuku and now recovery girl said in unison. All Might sensei, I respect and admire you too much to do this, but she doesn't. Care to take it away, recovery girl? Thwap, OWW. Toshinori rubbed his now bruised temple. Izuku nodded to Chio and continued, how could you ask her to do that? Do you think her body can handle the power as efficiently as a 45-year-old hunk of a man like you can? All Might rubbed his fingers together due to the embarrassment. He was dumb. If David were to hear this, he'll be dead, faster than he could say, smash. Alright, I'll be taking over these sessions from now on, until at least we can find a safe way for her to use one for all. Melissa had awoken due to all the commotion but was tired enough to not respond. She grew a blush when she saw Izuku scolding the symbol of peace, just because she got hurt. The next day, they came back again to test out Melissa's new abilities, under the supervision of Izuku. Wink wink. Melissa, Toshinori and Izuku were standing at a distance from the others and seemed to be discussing something. Alright now, Melissa, I want you to focus your power on your index finger, and then slowly reduce the percentage to the minimum you can reach. Melissa nodded and complied. Her index finger glowed with red veins forming, then by focusing the veins slowly dissipated and slight yellow lightning crackled around her finger. Toshinori took a leap of faith and said, now try flicking it. As she did, a small gust of air whipped out. Wow, you did it Melissa, this is great. Izuku beamed and quickly backpedaled when he saw a bruised finger that didn't sit well with him, so he concentrated on his thoughts and the information he could muster. He's so cute when he does that, Melissa thought. Wait, while he's just my friend. Oh young Melissa, you can't escape it. I've got it. He saw the perplexed gazes of the two pros and two teens. It's quite simple really. Remember All Might told us one for all reacts differently to every user. And as All Might calls it his muscle form, he's actually channeling the energy from the quirk throughout his body. Momo appeared beside them and picked up where he trailed off. Yeah, the muscles form on his entire body, not just his arms, not to mention switching between them will make your reaction time much slower. Melissa continued excitedly as it all made sense, and by distributing the power throughout my body I can reduce the backlash. I used about 5% before with my finger, now if I can use it like this. Melissa crouched down as she took a stance. One for all felt like a pool of near infinite energy. She took the bare minimum and channeled it throughout her entire body. First the red veins formed, then she reduced the output. All of them stared in awe as the girl got enveloped in golden lightning, which was crackling all around her body. All Might was both ashamed and proud at the sight. He buffed up and asked cheerfully, can you move while keeping this up young Melissa? Melissa took a moment before she dashed off at super speed and then came back. I think I can. Soon the lightning dissipated. It's hard to keep this up, but I think I now understand how to use this power. I can only use 5% right now, but I think with time I will be able to up my limit. Then from now on, we'll be training on your stamina and focus more on your quirk training, Aizawa stated flatly. While she was getting praise from the adults, a thought crossed Izuku's mind. That was hot. Wait, wah. The laughter of the author and editor rang throughout the multiverse. A couple of months passed by. It was almost time for the entrance exam. Izuku was getting a much better grasp at his quirk and was searching for more creative ways to use it without harming himself. The cell deterioration was still persistent when he tried using All for One. He just wished he would be able to harness its power soon. Cause truth be told, he was really curious about the said quirk and he couldn't wait to test out the multiple theories that he had written in his notes. Momo was in much better shape. Her stamina had greatly increased. She had learned multiple close combat techniques from Eraserhead, and with the supply of weapons she had in her arsenal she was unstoppable. In addition to this, Aizawa had Momo take lessons on using guns from Snipe. He introduced her to pressure points, and advised her to use rubber bullets rather than normal ones. From her early days when she used the tranquilizing dart to save a nice lady in the store, and now with the help of Snipe and some blueprints from Power Loader she was able to create a tranquilizer gun. But her greatest creation was to create a taser gun. It was admittedly difficult but she was able to achieve it. Melissa was learning to use her new technique that Izuku had cleverly dubbed as Full Cowl. She had been learning to master several of All Might's trademark moves as well as combining the power of One for All with Aizawa's close combat lessons. By this time she had a decent control over 5% of this power and the ability to momentarily draw 8%, but that came with a price of a nasty bruise and sore muscles, so she usually stayed to the available power that she had. Nezu was sitting in his office. Before him sat a very tired Aizawa and deflated All Might. They were deciding as to what they would do for the entrance exam for Izuku and Melissa. So Melissa wants to take the normal exam, huh? Nezu mused. Toshinori nodded and explained. She said that she had already received enough help from us, and to help preserve the secret of One for All it would benefit if she would be to take the standard exam. Aizawa put a finger on his chin as he questioned, but can't she just say that David Shield recommended her? Yaoyorozu is being recommended by her father and he's a CEO, not a hero. Toshinori sighed. I know, but she said that she wants to prove and earn a place in this school by herself. Nezu hummed. That is very admirable of her, and to be frank, I think she would do great no matter which one she took. The one we have to worry about is Izuku. I suppose you are recommending him, Aizawa. Yes. Previously we were planning on a race including several obstacles that they'd have to overcome, but as of a couple of months Izuku will lose the majority of his physical capabilities. Then what do you propose we should do? Aizawa perked up. I have an idea that you'd quite enjoy. Not much more could be said, as Nezu manically crackled as sound echoed throughout the halls of UA, scaring the poor students and teachers. Toshinori shuddered. Good luck, Izuku. UA entrance exam. It was the day of the exam. Melissa and Momo were standing outside UA's gates, both excited to show the results of their work. They were aware that Izuku was escorted by Aizawa earlier and Momo was sure she'd see him in the exam. It turns out this time both the recommended and the standard exams were being held on the same day, likely in the same time slot, and the recommended spots had also been updated from 4 to 5. After wishing each other good luck, they went to the written portion of the exam. Momo was content with her performance in the written exam. The three of them had been studying together and that had greatly benefited all of them. She hoped the exam went the same for others as well. She reached the orientation hall along with her peers. She was perplexed as she didn't find Izuku among them, but she mused as Aizawa-sensei would have already informed him of the exam, or he'd be getting his final green light from Recovery Girl, which was the reason he came much earlier. This year's announcer was Mr. Aizawa. First she thought it would be a means to demotivate the students, but it could also very well be to address much more experienced students than the common masses. Everyone settled in their respective seats as Aizawa's done with this voice flared. Good morning. To get straight to the point, he motioned at the big screen which showed a sort of map. As you can see here, you are going to have a sort of obstacle race. There are checkpoints for each of you that you must accomplish in order to pass. We won't be disclosing any of the obstacles with you at the moment, but if your files are anything to go by, you all are more than capable of passing, or not, I don't care. He sighed as he continued. This year we have 5 spots, and in the event of failure you are not permitted to take the regular exam. Try your luck next year. The standard examinees are also being debriefed as we speak. I wish you all the best of luck. Now go beyond, plus ultra. The students were about to shout, but then, or whatever, now move along and don't waste my time. The examinees stared in shock as the hobo of a man exited the hall. They were questioning their choice of school, while some were praying that they don't get him as their homeroom teacher. 10 minutes later, Momo and her fellow candidates changed into more athletic gear. They stood at their designated places on the massive field looking at their competition. She couldn't see any obstacle in her field of vision, but still got ready. I can make a bike, or should I go with the jetpack idea, Izuku suggested. Yeah, that one sounds better. I have eaten plenty, so it shouldn't be a problem, she thought as she did some stretches. From the corner of her eye she saw Midnight appear on a large podium and fired a shot with a pistol as the speakers announced. Start. Momo pressed the button on her jetpack and bolted that sparkled in existence, immediately taking the lead. 20 minutes earlier, in the opposite part of UA, Melissa had completed her written test and was sure to get a perfect score. She hoped the same for the other two as she made her way down to the announcement hall. She took note of her peers as they slowly filed in. Some of them had more noticeable quirks while most looked plain looking. She focused at the stage as the voice hero, Present Mike, showed up in his stupor. Welcome to today's live performance, everybody say, hey. Hazashi beamed at his audience. Utter silence. Melissa could see the disappointment dripping in Present Mike's expressions. Well, that's cool. Now my examinees listeners, I'm here to present the guidelines of the practical. Are you ready? Single quote ... single quote. Okay. This is how the test will go. Bring along whatever you want. After this presentation you'll each head to your assigned testing location. Each site is filled with 3 kinds of faux villains. Points are awarded for defeating each according to their respective difficulty levels. Use your quirks to disable these faux villains and earn points. That's your goal, listeners. And this goes without saying, keep things heroic. Attacking other examinees is prohibited. Melissa's mind went into overdrive, thinking of all the ways she could gather the most points. She noticed that there was something that Present Mike had left out in his explanation. What she didn't notice is she had started muttering that she picked up from her resident Greenette. The crowd was looking weirded out by her, suddenly as someone shouted amongst the crowd. A blue-haired with a straight posture stood up. May I ask a question? A spotlight went on the kid. Hit me. There appear to be no less than 4 types of faux villains on this handout. Such a bald error, if it is one, is highly unbecoming for UA, Japan's top academy. We're all here today in the hopes of being molded into model heroes. Additionally, you with the blonde hair. He shouted as he pointed at Melissa. You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting for all of us. If this is some sort of game to you, then please leave immediately. Melissa was a little taken aback with his bluntness. This is Izuku's fault. Might as well use his method to get out of it. She fixed her glasses and put one hand around her ear. Huh. Did you say something? Present Mike was so proud. Izuku had successfully imparted his wisdom to others, but before the shouting and the pinching started, he stepped in. All right, examinee 7111. Thank you for calling in with your request, but the 4th villain variety is worth 0 points. He's more of an obstacle. Only one at each site. A gimmick that'll rampage around in close quarters. The student with a stick up his openly glared at Melissa. He bowed at Present Mike. Thank you, sir. And sat down. That's all from me. I'll leave my listeners with our school motto. The great Napoleon Bonaparte once said, the true hero consists in being superior to the ills of life. Are you ready to go beyond, plus ultra? Break a leg, everyone. 10 minutes later, Melissa was standing outside examination area A. She noticed the blue stuck-up boy was also there. She mentally prepared herself as well as did a few stretches. 5% of 1 for all should be enough for this. Hopefully I won't be breaking any bones today, she mused. Some voices could be heard from afar. She noticed that her exam city was quite near to the recommended exams designated area. She looked as the gates her fake city opened and Present Mike's voice flared. Go. There are no countdown in real battles. Come on everybody, run, run, run. Melissa took her stance and activated 1 for all. Full cowling 5% as she enveloped in golden electricity and dashed off to the city, leaving her peers dumbfounded. Let's win this, she declared. Momo lost her lead just halfway through the race. She was running on 3rd position. Just behind was a heterochromatic teen who seemed to be having an ice quirk and a wind quirk user who was in the lead. There were several hurdles along the way, nothing too difficult for her. While she was flying with her jetpack, she could see most of the candidates. There was a girl who could split her body, a lipless guy who was swimming in the ground. But no sign of Izuku. She knew that he had lost his mobility and most of his physical capabilities last week, and could no longer run. Maybe Nedzu has something else planned for him, she tried to assure herself. She saw the second last checkpoint was robots, and with the number 3 printed on their arms. That's weird, she thought while preparing an EMP to disable her designated robot and head off to the final obstacle. Momo reached her final obstacle and was stunned to see 5 giant robots, taller than most buildings. Just as she and the other students were about to retort and disable them, the weather changed, clouds started forming and in front of her levitated her best friend, purple veins forming on his body, eyes blood red and the look of determination on his face. Momo and the other candidates saw in awe as Izuku struck 5 slightly smaller lightning bolts, melting and destroying the giant robots swiftly. Just as he did so she could see the finish line. Without asking what was happening, she in tow with other examinees bolted towards the finish line. While Izuku took a look around and promptly floated away. An hour earlier before the exam, Aizawa and Izuku reached Ua. The school was peacefully quiet as the students were given a day off to conduct the first-year entrance exams. The father-son duo reached the principal office, where Nedzu and Chiyo were already waiting for the two. They all greeted each other and Izuku was sent off with Recovery Girl for one last testing. 5 minutes later they came back and Nedzu coughed as he began. So, Izuku, I believe that as of last week you have lost most of your mobility, then what are you planning to do for your exam? Izuku nodded. I can still walk, not to mention I have upped my limit for my lightning strikes and managed to learn to fire some smaller ones. As for the lost physical abilities, I can levitate, though for it I have to constantly change weather, which is pretty taxing for my cells. Izuku sighed. I have managed to develop a move which will help me in such matters. It's not much but way better than walking. I levitate and constantly increase air pressure, surging myself forward. It's not even close to flying, but it's my best option as of now. Aizawa stayed silent. He knew the experience Izuku went through last week was traumatizing to say the least. He couldn't run, cannot do physically taxing jobs, and probably won't be able to walk for a long period of time. Something a teen should never experience. Nedzu hummed as he formed a tiny smirk on his face. That's excellent progress, young Izuku. Now for our recommended exams, we had prepared an obstacle course for our students. Izuku paled at that. He can't beat people in a race. Fortunately, for you we have other plans. You see, there is a certain robot, we like to call it the 0-pointer. It's a small hurdle we throw for our standard examinees. This time we have 5 in the recommended ones and 1 in each city for the standard exam. That adds up to 12 0-pointers in total. Your goal is to destroy each of them in the 15-minute time period. Izuku beamed. He could let loose in front of robots, this was the best. But, Aizawa gathered his attention. You will be getting informed by me as to which city to go to. You see, the 0-pointers are going to pop up in different cities at different times. I will be informing you as which city you are needed and you will do so. Am I clear? You are not to attack any city unless I don't inform you to. Crystal. Good. Now the first one we'll be having is City F. Your time will start in 10 minutes. Change into your athletic gear and begin with your exam, young Izuku. Nedzu informed as he started crackling. Izuku just picked up his bag and made himself scarce. 10 minutes later he was standing at a tall building in the said fake city. The earth started shaking as he saw the humongous robot beginning his rampage. Okay, Nedzu really needs to learn measurements. How is this small? Izuku levitated mid-air and formed a small concentrated tornado. He needed to save his power for the recommended part, as there will be 5 of these abominations there. His tornado met the robot head-on and within a matter of seconds, small sparks could be seen going off inside the robots as it short-circuited and fell over. Not the best strategy but the best he could do at the moment. Copying the technique he moved from city to city. Examinees saw in awe and fear as a kid with immense power went demolishing the robot they didn't even hope to face. He noticed that only the recommended and field A had been left, when his earpiece flared up. Aizawa's voice came, "Alright Izuku, move on to the recommended section, and I am repeating this one more time. Do not interfere with other candidates, you have less than 3 minutes left, now go." Complying, Izuku floated and surged over to the obstacle course and did his job. He saw Momo streaming past the field with her jetpack. He wanted to say hello but both of them were in a time crunch, so he got to work. Firing the strikes of this magnitude was heavily taxing on his body, and he knew he'd be regretting it later, but he had almost less than 2 minutes to finish his last robot. Melissa dashed throughout the field punching robots here and there. She could see her peers were starting to catch up to her as they were announcing the points they were receiving. She had earned around 60 points when she thought she could slow down a bit and gather her energy. She had been helping out other examinees, while gaining points for herself. She had started to feel a little pain at her knuckles from punching these robots, but pushed through it. Melissa hoped the exam for the other two was going smoothly as hers. President Mike's voice beamed throughout the city, only 2 minutes remaining. As if on cue, the ground started rumbling, shaking something that could be confused with an earthquake. Instead, a giant robot rose up from the end of the fake city and went berserk. It was taller than most buildings present and was making his way towards the examinees. She was about to turn away and get to safety when she heard a cry for help. Back in the judge's room, the teachers were sitting assessing this year's crop. Multiple videos of specific students and their files were before them. Namori, can you at least pretend to look at other candidates? You know Izuku had already passed. Aizawa deadpanned. Shota, did you see how cute he looks? Plus look how he struck lightning in that recommended section. I bet Mike's gonna be mad he couldn't see this live. Vlad. King spoke up. Your kid sure is something else, Eraserhead, but look at that blonde girl. She has some sort of strength enhancement quirk. Look at the golden electricity, and the speed. Aizawa, I know you are taking your son in your class, but I want her in mine. No, Aizawa stated flatly. No, Midnight exclaimed. No, Toshinori chimed in. Vlad sighed in defeat. Aizawa noticed something that looked quite absurd to him. There was an ash blonde-haired kid, just standing there looking at the sky, doing nothing. Hey, what's that kid doing there? He hasn't moved since Izuku did his work in that city. He was doing pretty well from the start, had already grabbed 77 combat points, while more than enough to pass, but just staring at the sky midst the exam is just dumb. Ectoplasm spoke. Ah yes, he is one of the best candidates we have, at least in terms of combat. He hadn't earned a single rescue point, Nedzu informed as he picked up the file of said student. Here we are. Katsuki Bakugo. Aldera Middle School. Quirk. Explosion. Aizawa's eyes widened with realization. Oh boy. Izuku moved to his final destination. He was so tired with continuous levitation, not to mention his body was aching and was experiencing a serious backlash from his quirk at this point. He reached Examination City A, and found Melissa was here. He also noticed that there was someone who was caught in the rubble and was in the path of the mighty zero-pointer. But this one was different, this one was bigger, and the color theme was also different. What are those pads on its body? Without a moment of hesitation, he fired his standard lightning bolt, which he was sure will be his last one for the day. The robot came out unscathed. Izuku came to the realization that this one was insulated. He had already overused his quirk. He fell on the ground and was on the verge of fainting when, as a last resort, he sent a small tornado its way. Melissa watched in horror as the robot wasn't even hazed by Izuku's attack, not to mention he fell down. The veins on his body were violently shifting. She knew he was in pain and pushing himself had worsened it. She knew that small gust of wind won't do anything to the robot, and in such occurrence, Izuku will push himself on the verge and might not survive. Not to mention the girl who appeared to be having her ankle stuck in the rubble would also not make it, so her instincts kicked in and without any hesitation. She jumped, cocked her arm back, surged 100% of one for all into her arm, and thrusted it forward, with a Detroit smash. Toshinori was so proud of his successor's selfless acts. She saved not one but 2 lives by sacrificing herself, but a thought crossed his mind. Principal Nedzu. Izuku won't fail, would he? Oh no, incidentally he had already passed when he struck his way through the recommended section. This was just to check his upper limits, although I should have predicted that young Melissa wouldn't hesitate to jump and help him and the girl who was stuck. Truth be told, I am very proud of both of them. Teamwork is an essential facet in being a hero. The room visibly relaxed, even Aizawa gave a sigh of relief. And Aizawa, after treatment with Recovery Girl, bring him tomorrow to school, I have a surprise for him. Shota nodded and rubbed his temple as he stood against the wall. What does the rat want from him now? Melissa was falling through the sky with a purple arm and a destroyed robot. She definitely broke her legs from the fall, but just then a familiar tuft of green hair with wild highlights floated and caught her in his arms. You were great, Melissa. Thank you, now let's get you to recovery, girl. Melissa nodded and dug deeper in his embrace, enjoying the warmth. With a sudden pang in her chest went violent. The realization hit her like a truck and a small blush crept its way to her cheeks. Oh boy. The three reunited on the way back. As they discussed the events that unfolded that day, Melissa was still limping a little, so she had one arm around Izuku for balance. They separated their ways as the respective guardians showed up. The next day Izuku was brought to Ua. Aizawa had informed him that it was Nedzu's request and he would get to rest for the rest of the week. They both showed up at Ua where Nedzu was standing at the gates to receive them. Good morning, Izuku. Hello, Aizawa. I want you to know that you exceeded my expectations yesterday, Izuku. Izuku just stared dumbfounded. I hadn't even completed my goal and I am getting praised. Nedzu just chuckled. Oh my, yes, your test ended when you cleared your way through the recommended section. That last robot was from a special request from Power Loader, who wanted to check its durability against your lightning strikes. Izuku sighed in relief. So what are we doing today? Oh, I have a special surprise for you. You remember when you first picked out quirks from Tartarus, Tsukauchi gave you 2 options instead of 3. Izuku and Aizawa's eyes widened. Oh yes, I have cleared it with recovery, girl. This one will not be that taxing on your body. Not to mention with all the hard work you have put in, makes it easier now for you to use all for one. Think of it as a back-to-school present. Izuku's eyes glittered. His father had offered metal manipulation back to him, to which he promptly refused, saying that Eraserhead needs it more than him. But Nedzu, why are we here? Shouldn't we be at Tartarus for such an event? Aizawa inquired. Oh yes. Normally you would be, but I have him transported here. We are already pushing Izuku to use his quirk on his rest day, so might as well make the trip for you two a little shorter. They looked as the truck had arrived with a person gagged and chained. The villain goes by the name, Third Law. It's a joke regarding his quirk. Impact recoil allows the user to reverse the impact caused by an opposing physical force, damaging the opponent instead. Though the quirk does not seem to cancel the impact completely, and by your own statement, new quirks are like new muscles, it would be pretty weak at first, but you could train it better. I have particularly picked this one out for you, as to provide you with a minor defense against close combat opponents. Izuku slightly smiled and slowly approached the criminal, connecting his palm with the uncovered area of the villain's forearm. He felt the quirk flow into him. Thank you so much, Uncle Nedzu. Izuku walked over to Aizawa asking to hit him. Nedzu was a little stumped at the newfound title, but shrieked inwardly. A week had passed and finally the result came. The trio of them were sitting in Toshinori's apartment, where himself and David were talking on video chat, when 3 letters came. Momo decided to open her first, when a figure of Principal Nedzu came from the disc projector. Greetings, Momo Yaoyorozu. It is my utmost pleasure to inform you that you have passed our recommended exams. You placed 3rd in the race, but in the event of a student giving up his place, ultimately you acquired 2nd position. You have been placed in Class 1A. Congratulations, Yaoyorozu, this is your Hero Academia. Melissa tackled Momo, while Izuku calmly joined the hug and congratulated her for her accomplishment. Next was Melissa, for which Aizawa had shown up in the projection. Good, whatever time you are watching this, I am pleased to announce that you have passed the standard examination with an outstanding score of 65 points, but there was more to the exam than mindlessly punching robots. There were rescue points awarded to individuals who helped or saved fellow examinees, and while your final attack was reckless, it saved 2 lives. So with 70 rescue points, you have been placed first with a whopping score of 135 points. You have been placed in Class 1A. Congratulations, Melissa Shield, this is your Hero Academia. Again, love was showered and hugs were given. A loud congratulating voice of David Shield came from the computer. Congratulations, Melissa, my girl, I am so proud of you. Melissa with tears in her eyes sobbed, thank you, Papa, I miss you so much. I'll be coming for the Expo this year, so you better clear your schedule. David beamed at that and nodded. Now was Izuku's turn. His announcer was, Booyah. I am here as a projection. I am proud to announce that you have passed in the recommended exam. Since your exam wasn't a competitive one, there wasn't any position that you acquired, but you did an ultimate showing out there. You have made immense progress, young Izuku. In the past few months I am beaming with pride to see how far you have gotten. And can't wait to see how great of a hero you'd be. You have been placed in Class 1A. Congratulations young Izuku, this is your hero academia. The other two were aware of Izuku's passing when he showed them his new quirk, by asking Melissa to hit him, which she gladly did. As the hologram disappeared, Melissa, Momo and David, were all glaring at Toshinori. How come he gets All Might? They all shouted in unison, while Izuku just walked over and gave Toshinori a warm hug. Thank you All Might, for everything. The anger in the air was dissipated in a second with this gesture. After the hugs and praises, they all pushed their fists in the air and chanted. We are in same class. And together we'll be the best heroes. Welcome to UA, Quirk Apprehension Test. It was the day before the new semester at UA, and the staff were discussing the placements and giving a rundown of new first years. Good morning everyone, I hope you are all excited for yet another new year at this institution. This one would be extremely eventful as we have our dear old symbol of peace will be starting his tenure here. The staff had been previously debriefed about Toshinori's injury and his time limit in buffed form. Nedzu gave a slight nod to Toshinori and continued, now without further ado, I would request Aizawa and Vlad, in that order give a brief information about our new students and their respective quirks. Aizawa stood up with a file in his hand, he coughed and began, this year we have 22 students in both classes. In mine there are 4 recommended students and 18 from the standard exam. I'll give a rundown according to their assigned roll numbers. 1. Yuga Aoyama. Quirk. Naval Laser Nibiru za Nibiru Reza. Yuga's quirk allows him to shoot a powerful sparkling laser cannon from his navel. It is so powerful, it can blast through 2 meters of solid concrete. If he fires the laser for more than 1 second at a time, he will suffer intestinal distress. 2. Mina Ishido. Quirk. Acid Sand. Mina's quirk allows her to produce a corrosive liquid from her body of which she can control the solubility and viscosity of. There is a limit to how long she can produce the corrosive liquid until her skin gradually loses its natural resistance to it. 3. Tsuyu Asui. Quirk. Frog Keiru. Tsuyu's quirk allows her to do anything a frog can do, such as enhanced swimming abilities, hopping at long distances, extending her tongue up to a maximum of 20 meters which is strong enough to lift an entire person's body weight, sticking to walls, ejecting, washing her stomach, camouflaging herself, secreting mucus with different, controlled effects, itch-inducing, scent masking, paralysis. 4. Tenya Iida. Quirk. Engine. Tenya's quirk manifests in the form of car-like engines in each of his calves, giving him incredible running speed and extreme kicking power. Tenya needs to fuel his engines by drinking orange juice. 5. Ochako Uraraka. Quirk. Zero gravity. Ochako's quirk gives her the power to nullify the effects of gravity on solid targets, living and non-living, by touching them with the pads on her fingertips, causing them to become weightless and float. She is able to cancel the effect of her quirk by touching her finger pads together. 6. Mashirao Ojiro. Quirk. Tail. Shippo. Mashirao's quirk is that he has a long, powerful, sturdy tail. He is incredibly adept at using it, having demonstrated creative abilities, such as whipping it down against the ground to give himself a speed boost. 7. Denki Kaminari. Quirk. Electrification. Taiden. Denki's quirk allows him to generate electricity and cover his body in it. While he can also emit this energy over a distance, Denki has little to no control over it. Exceeding his wattage limit causes his brain to short-circuit, leaving him in a vulnerable state for 1 hour. 8. Eijiro Kirishima. Quirk. Hardening. Koka. Eijiro's quirk gives him the power to harden and sharpen any or all parts of his body, causing his flesh to become jagged and rock-like. 9. Koji Koda. Quirk. Anavoice. Akemono Boizu. Koji's quirk gives him the ability to command any creature in the animal kingdom by speaking to them. Whatever command he gives, the animal will carry it out. However, he is unable to exert his control if they cannot hear his command. The target must also be a real animal and not merely animal-like. Koji can also exchange information with the animals to find the locations of various people and potential enemies faster. 10. Rikido Sato. Quirk. Sugar Rush. Shuga Dupu. Shuga Dopu. Rikido's quirk allows him to increase his strength 5-fold for 3 minutes. In order to activate his quirk, he needs to consume 10 grams of sugar. When converting sugar into strength, His cognitive functions gradually drop, making him very sleepy afterward. For every additional 10 grams of sugar he ingests, he extends the time of increased strength by another 3 minutes. 11. Mezo Shoji. Quirk. Dupli arms, Fukuseiwan, lit. Replication arm. Mezo's quirk is that he has a set of tentacles alongside his arms. He can transform the tips of these tentacles to replicate other parts of his body, mouth, ears, eyes. The duplicated body parts are more efficient than the originals. As a result, Mezo is able to hear better, see through more angles at a time, and they grant him much higher degrees of strength. 12. Kyoka Jiro. Quirk. Earphone jack, Iyahanjaku Iyahanjaku. Kyoka's quirk is that she has a pair of headphone jacks hanging from her earlobes. When the jacks are plugged into something, Kyoka can channel the sound of her heartbeat into it in the form of a violent vibration attack. She can stretch her earlobes several meters. This quirk also allows her to hear minuscule sounds and vibrations from her surroundings. 13. Hanta Siro. Quirk. Tape Tepu Tepu. Hanta's quirk is that he has tape dispenser-like organs in his elbows, from which he can shoot long cellophane tape-like strips. He can also retract them. They appear to be somewhat sturdier than regular tape. Overuse of his quirk will cause his skin to dry out. 14. Fumikage Tokiyami. Quirk. Dark Shadow Deku Shadow. Fumikage's quirk allows him to manifest a sentient shadow monster from his body that he can materialize and contract freely. Dark Shadow's energy is limited, and can be drained by bright light. When it runs out of energy, Dark Shadow retracts back into Fumikage's body. 15. Shoto Todoroki. Quirk. Half cold half hot Hanrei Hanan. Shoto's quirk gives him the ability to generate ice from the right side of his body, and fire from his left side. 16. Toru Hagakure. Quirk. Invisibility Tamika. Toru's quirk is that her body is completely invisible. 17. Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk. Explosion Bakua. Katsuki's quirk allows him to secrete nitroglycerin-like sweat from the palms of his hands and ignite it on command, allowing him to create strong explosions. 12. The more Katsuki sweats, the stronger his explosions become. 13. If Katsuki overuses this power, his forearms will start to ache. 18. Hitoshi Shinso. Quirk. Brainwashing Senino. Hitoshi's quirk allows him to put someone in a state where the victim is forced to obey whatever he commands. He can only activate this power when his target verbally responds to him. Brainwashing needs to be intentionally activated and will not take effect if Hitoshi doesn't want it to. 19. Kashiko Sekigai. Quirk. Chart. Kashiko's quirk allows her to create a holographic map of the surrounding area. This allows her to locate and monitor others. 10. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Registered weather manipulation Kisho Sosa. Izuku's quirk allows him to manipulate the weather in various ways. He had shown he is capable of creating large storm clouds, summon lightning bolts, and even create giant tornadoes. This quirk also allows him to manipulate wind and grants him flight levitation. The storms created from this quirk is strong enough to severely damage an entire island. Despite its incredible power, weather manipulation puts an enormous strain on the user's body, causing cellular degeneration as well as immense pain that is capable of putting him out of commission. The quirk also has a slight healing factor that helps the user survive the near-fatal cell deterioration. Another drawback of the said quirk is major loss of mobility and physical taxing capabilities. 21. Melissa Shield. Quirk. Registered power Pawa Pawa. Melissa's quirk allows her body to contain and unleash enormous physical power. She can use this to enhance the strength of isolated appendages or her whole body. 22. Momo Yaoyorozu. Quirk. Creation Sozo. Momo's quirk gives her the ability to create any non-living material, object from her exposed skin by transforming the molecular structure of her fat cells. In order to create something, she needs to understand the molecular structure of what the material object is made of. So that's about it. Aizawa gave a long sigh and sat down. Toshinori had been listening intently and felt at peace that both the secret of all for one and one for all had been preserved and spilled as half-truth. Izuku's minor cell activation quirk is omitted as his original quirk's healing factor. He also noted that Melissa's name of the quirk had been tampered with, but he didn't question it at the moment. Midnight perked up. So, little Tensai's brother is finally here. And Endeavor's son too. Nedzu nodded. Yes, we have many heirs of esteemed personalities in Class 1A, now you may begin Vlad. Vlad hummed and promptly stood up. My class have 3 recommended students and 19 from the standard exam. Before he could continue, Ectoplasm intervened. Wait, weren't there only 5 spots for the recommended exam? We know Izuku were an exception, but how come we have 6 recommended students? All the teachers except Aizawa and Vlad looked at Nedzu, who just formed a grin on his face. Ah, do you all remember the winner of the recommended exam obstacle race? He asked as everyone nodded with perplexed looks. It was really preposterous for a student to place first in an exam and then back out of admission altogether. Inasa Yaorishi, he came back after the said rejection of his admission to UA and informed me that for reasons that are yet unknown to me, he backed out in haste, and had come to the realization that in doing so he had made a grave mistake. To make amends he asked me to allow him to join our institution even if it means that he would be placed last on the race, due to his misconduct. If not, then he'll apply next year. I simply couldn't let that happen to such a bright hero aspirant, so I offered him a position here, though uncommon, but his only request was to not be placed with Shoto Todoroki. There might be some tension between the two, but I hope we can help bring these 2 hero hopefuls work together in harmony. The staff just nodded. They knew better not to question Nedzu's decision. Vlad coughed and continued with his debriefing. So, as of now, here are Class 1B students according to their roll numbers. 1. Yosetsu Awase. Quirk. Well, Yosetsu's quirk gives him the ability to fuse objects together at an atomic level, although he needs to be touching both objects in order to fuse them. This quirk is effective on both organic and inorganic material. 2. Sen Kaibara. Quirk. Gyrate Senkai. Sen's quirk allows him to make any part of his body rotate like a drill. 3. Toguru Kamakiri. Quirk. Razor Sharp Janae. Toguru's quirk allows him to produce large blades from any part of his body. 4. Shihai Kuwaro. Quirk. Black Kuro. 6. Shihai's quirk allows him to merge his body into anything that is dark in color, whether naturally dark or dark via external circumstances, such as shadows. 5. Itsuka Kendo. Quirk. Big Fist Taiken. Itsuka's quirk grants her the ability to enlarge both of her hands to a gigantic size. With the increased size comes enhanced striking power and gripping capabilities. 6. Yui Kodai. Quirk. Sized Seizu. Yui's quirk grants her the ability to alter the size of non-living objects that she has interacted with. It appears to be activated by Yui touching her fingertips together. 7. Kanoko Komori. Quirk. Mushroom Kanoko. Kanoko's quirk allows her to spread various types of fungus spores from her body. The spores will quickly grow into full-grown mushrooms once they make contact with a solid surface. The mushrooms can grow from various surfaces, including Kanoko's surroundings, her own body, and even her opponent's body. They only last for 2 to 3 hours. The spores spread better in a humid environment. 8. Abara Shiozaki. Quirk. Vines Suru. Abara's quirk gives her hair-like vines that grow on her head. She can lengthen and manipulate the vines, allowing her to attack, defend, and grapple. She also has the ability to detach them at will. The vines will grow back, provided her head receives proper sunlight and water. 9. Jirota Shishida. Quirk. Beast by Pseudo Bisuto. 1. Jirota's quirk allows him transform into a large, monstrous beast man. This monster form drastically augments his strength, speed, and durability, as well as his senses of hearing and smell. While he is transformed, he becomes more wild, making him reckless. 10. Narengeki Shota. Quirk. Twin Impact Suin Inpakuto. Narengeki's quirk, Twin Impact, allows Narengeki to, at the site of any initial impact, make the point of contact receive a second impact. The second impact is several times stronger than the initial blow. 11. Pony Tsunori. Quirk. Horn Cannon Hanho. Pony's quirk gives her a pair of horns on her head. She is able to launch her horns as projectiles and a new set will grow back almost immediately. She can remotely control up to 4 of them at a time. 12. Kosei Subara. Quirk. Solid Air Kukigyoko. Kosei's quirk allows him to solidify any air he breathes out, allowing him to create invisible walls and/or platforms. The size of the wall or platform depends on his lung capacity. 13. Tetsutsu. Quirk. Steel, Sudiru. Tetsu's quirk allows him to turn his body into steel. 14. Setsuna Tokage. Quirk. Lizard tail splitter, Tokage no Shippokiri. 4. Setsuna's quirk allows her to split up her body into as many as 50 pieces. 3. Each and every one of these split pieces are able to levitate and move freely through the air. Setsuna's pieces can also regenerate if they are destroyed or otherwise unusable. 15. Manga Fukidashi. Quirk. Comic Komiku. Manga's quirk allows him to materialize words in midair by speaking them. These words are onomatopoeia, words that describe sounds, which can manifest the effects of the phenomenon that the sound suggests. The only drawback is that the overuse of his quirk can cause him to get an incredibly sore throat. 16. Juzo Honanuki. Quirk. Softening, Juka. Juzo's quirk allows him to soften any non-living thing he touches. For example, he can soften the ground to make it similar to quicksand, hindering movements and mobility. If Juzo makes contact again, he can undo the effect. He is also capable of swimming through softened material. 17. Kojira Bondo. Quirk. Smedine, Semidane. 1. Kojira's quirk allows him to spray large amounts of a fast-drying glue-like liquid from the 7 holes on his face. The liquid is sticky and can be used to trap people and attach things to each other. It is stated that he can control the speed at which his adhesive dries. 18. Nito Monoma. Quirk. Copy. Nito's quirk allows him to duplicate and use another person's quirk after coming into physical contact with the user. He is currently able to hold 2 quirks at a time and can maintain any copied powers for 5 minutes. This limit can be increased. After the time limit runs out, he loses the copied quirk until he once again touches the original, gains full access to the quirk he has copied and can use it however he likes. However, he cannot simultaneously use multiple quirks, only one at a time. 19. Rimero Fujimi. Quirk. Zombie virus, Zombie Uirisu, Zombie Warusu. Rimero's quirk allows him to release a pink gas from his body. Anyone who breathes it in will take on the appearance and mental capacity of a zombie. The people transformed into zombies gain zombie-like strength and endurance. Anyone bitten by one of these zombies will also be transformed into a zombie. Rimero is not immune to the transformative power of his gas. Currently the zombies stay in such a state for about 5 minutes. 20. Reiko Yanagi. Quirk. Poltergeist, Porutegezuto. 1. Reiko's quirk allows her to telekinetically control nearby objects. The weight limit of her quirk is roughly the weight of the average human. 21. Hiryu Rin. Quirk. Scales Uroko. Hiryu's quirk allows him to sprout strong, durable reptilian scales from his skin. These scales protect him like armor. He can also shoot these scales with considerable strength and speed. 22. Inasa Yoarashi. Quirk. Whirlwind, Senpu. Inasa's quirk grants him the ability to freely manipulate the air around him over a very wide area. That makes all of them. Toshinori and Aizawa instantly recognize the copy quirk user to be the one who caused the panic in their previous school regarding Izuku's quirk. They just silently hoped that something similar wouldn't transpire at UA. Namori deflated a little. I just hoped my little Izu and Setsuna would be in the same class. Oh well. Nedzu's eyes did catch a specific quirk among Vlad's. Explanation: that zombie virus quirk is very troublesome. Looks like you have your work cut out for yourself, Vlad, though I will advise you to wear a gas mask while quirk training. Vlad grunted as he sat down. So that's our list of first years. If I remember correctly, Izuku and Sekigai had already moved in the dorms. Aizawa hummed, and other students will be joining them as of tomorrow. We hope as always this year too we can make these hero hopefuls stay here enjoyable and educational. All the best everyone. You all are dismissed. Everybody nodded, and one by one filed out the rooms and went to prepare for the new students' arrival. Melissa Shield had packed up her stuff, and was on her way to UA dormitories. She reached the Heights Alliance, and made her way to the common room. She was one of the first people to arrive, and noticing the floor plan she was a little sad to find out that Izuku was on 5th floor while she was on the 4th, but she found solace in the fact that at least Momo's room was right next to her. She paced over her room to find that all of her stuff had previously been shifted and the movers had arranged them to the best of their ability. Melissa placed down her handbag and took a look around her room. She had provided Ua a blueprint for the way she wanted it. The walls were light teal in color, with minor aesthetics, 2 large cabinets for books, a small workshop for her hobbies of tech development and a neatly placed transparent box full of prescription glasses and lenses. It seemed that all the rooms had their own closets, balconies and attached bathrooms. She locked her room, and made her way to the 5th floor. She found it weird that there were only 2 rooms there, one named, Homeroom Teacher, and the other, Izuku Midoriya. She knew Izuku had moved a few days earlier than the rest, due to his father moving here full-time, and the fact that Recovery Girl wanted to study, all for one, in depth before the year started. Apparently, it was Izuku's decision if he wanted to inform his classmates about the said quirk, though the students will be required to keep it a secret as part of their contract with Ua, but he decided against it for the time being. Something with that the students will have to earn his trust and respect in order for him to do so. It had been a week since she had been alerted of having certain feelings toward the resident Greenette. She wasn't sure of what they meant, but she hadn't mustered up the courage to act on them. She had never felt like that before, and she made a note in her head to speak with Momo about this. She knocked on his door, but as the door was unlocked it flew open due to the force, revealing a petite girl with a round face and pale hair, tinted a periwinkle blue, that reaches down to her shoulders, curving outwards at the ends. The mysterious girl whipped her head and formed a slight smirk on her face. She wore a pair of triangular glasses with thick dark frames. "Oh, greetings. Myself Kashiko Sekigai, it's a pleasure to meet you." The girl greeted as she adjusted her glasses and bowed. Melissa didn't know why she was feeling threatened and hurt by seeing a girl in Izuku's room, but keeping her composure she formed a warm smile and bowed back. "Hi, I am Melissa Shield, it's nice to meet you too." Kashiko noticed her accent and the flat tone. "Wait, as in David Shield's daughter? Are you a transfer student?" "Yes, I am, but please don't treat me differently because of my heritage." As for the second part, no, I attended middle school in Japan to get acquainted with the environment. She paused as the girl in front of her closed her notebooks. "Excuse me, have you seen Izuku?" Kashiko was about to answer and ask her about the deal with the first name basis, but shrugged the latter as a habit of Americans. She was interjected by Izuku, who was carrying a bundle of notebooks. "Hey Melissa. It's so good to see you. I hope you settled in okay. I am sure you have been acquainted with Sekigai. She was the first one here, after me of course, and guess what? She has a hobby of analyzing quirks too. We were comparing our notes just now." He beamed as he placed the notebooks before the said girl. Melissa was mentally cursing herself for not picking up the hobby. She loved analyzing, but she wasn't that much a quirk enthusiast. Of course she has the same hobby as him. And now they are gonna get married and have a couple of kids and they will have the same hobby too. After a moment of mental panic and noticing that the other 2 occupants have gone back to their notes exchanging, she calmed herself down. Her thoughts were interrupted when Izuku perked up, earthed to Melissa, giving him her attention. Izuku continued, "Oh, good to have you back with us. Has Momo settled in? Last when I saw her she was contacting her butlers to take her bed away as the piece of furniture took most of her room." Melissa sighed. "I actually don't know, I just came right here, though she did inform me when she first reached here. I figured she'd be with you." Izuku chuckled as Kashiko grabbed his attention. Izuku. Did you get notes on that upstart hero MT lady who recently debuted? I missed her due to my mid-school finals. First name basis. She had lived long enough in Japan to get what that might mean. Izuku gave a million-volt smile and showed her his volume 19. Here she is. It's actually quite ironic she fought a villain that had a similar quirk to her, not to mention she stole the credit of Camus. Melissa sighed in defeat. Seems like both of them really hit it off. Better go find Momo. She bid them goodbyes and made her way to Momo's room. Momo had just received her new, smaller, bed and had finally finished with her room, when a deflated Melissa entered her room. "Hey Melissa. What's up?" Melissa sat at the corner of her bed and sighed. "Just don't know what to feel about the girl up in Izuku's room. It seems he had already expanded his friend's circle, huh? Someone's jealous," she mused as she said. "Yeah, she actually moved roughly on the same day as Izuku. He told me that they were introduced by Nedzu, on account of both being huge quirk enthusiasts." Melissa felt even worse after that. The 2 seemed to be living with each other in the dorms alone, and that thought agitated her more. Well, let's forget about that for now. If I remember correctly, there is a dorm meeting in a couple of hours. Want to go sightseeing for the time being?" Melissa just nodded and went exploring UA, in the hope of lifting her spirits up. 3 hours later, the students of Class 1A had all settled and were currently seated in the common room. Izuku and Kashiko were the last ones to arrive. Izuku took a look around the room and was dumbfounded as all of them were staring at him, when a voice was heard. "It's him." Even Melissa and Momo were weirded out with sheer silence and the staring their best friend was receiving. Having enough of this, Izuku decided to speak up. "Hello everyone, remember me?" He lightly chuckled. A pink-colored girl stood up with a huge grin on her face. "You're the weathery guy." "That's a great title, but I go by Izuku Midoriya. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. As classmates, I hope we can get along." The silence faded as everyone greeted one another, while an ash-blonde boy watched in horror and a faint word exited his throat. Deku. Izuku heard that pathetic nickname he received all those years ago, and saw the guy who said those words. See, could it be? Before the two could interact, a yellow caterpillar of a sleeping bag rolled in. "Ah, a floating set of clothes," shouted. Izuku had seen Aizawa's way of entrance. He used the same set of tricks every year: shocking, testing, expelling. While Izuku was familiar with his antics, the rest of them were not, so when a hobo of a man exited out of the bag, some took a defensive stance, while others were too shocked to move. "It took you 8 seconds to shut up. That's not gonna work here." He neatly placed his bag on a nearby table and with a tired expression, spoke up. "Hi, I am Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher." The students were barely able to comprehend that when he swished out a couple of gym uniforms from his bag. "Now, put these on and head outside. Izuku, bring them to your field," he said as he exited the dorms. "Okay everyone, meet me here in 5 minutes sharp. If you don't, we won't wait for you, and I mean it when I say you wouldn't want that." Exactly on time, all the students changed in their respective gym clothes and Izuku and Kashiko brought the students to the field in an orderly fashion. Aizawa stood on the field patiently waiting for the students when he noticed a slight ruffling through some bushes nearby. A moment later, 2 golden bangs could be seen. At least be subtle with favoritism, shouldn't he be giving his speech at the orientation? Aizawa sighed, as if on cue. Inanimate murmurs were heard at a distance where Midnight and Mike were trying their best to hide behind a wall. "Oh, those idiots have classes, don't they?" Namori is the homeroom teacher of 1C. A couple of minutes later, Izuku with Kashiko arrived with 1A in tow. They came early than I expected. I guess Rat's decision of making Izuku class representative and that Sekigai girl vice representative wasn't half bad. "You are late." Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose, while taking out his phone. "We are doing a quirk apprehension test." "What about entrance ceremonies or guidance sessions?" A girl with a perpetual blush on her cheeks asked in a low tone. "It's irrational to waste time on that stuff if you want to become heroes." UA is known for his freestyle educational system. That mean I get to run my class as I see fit. Softball throw, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running, grip strength, side-to-side stepping, upper body training, seated toe touch. You did all these in middle school, yes. Your standard, no quirk allowed, gym tests. This country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the averages of those records. It's not rational, the Department of Education is just procrastinating. He released a deep sigh. Izuku, how far could you throw in middle school? Izuku felt a little weird answering, because the man in front of him was the one who took those tests, but still answered, 78 meters sensei. Aizawa threw the ball over to Izuku. Great, now try it with your quirk, do whatever you want, just don't leave the circle. Izuku nodded and stepped into the said circle. He was about to embark on his hero career on the same field he practiced all these years. Keeping the nostalgia to himself, he did as asked. Everyone watched in awe, as the boy with white hair and green highlights started levitating midair. The clouds began to shift, purple veins were visible on the boy's body. Suddenly he threw the ball, a fairly normal throw. Until the air pressure increased, a small tornado was formed which grew violent by the second. Some were in fear and stepped back, while others in disbelief. The ball got enveloped by the tornado and soon the gust of wind settled. With shooting the ball in the sky at unimaginable speed, the boy slowly descended back to the ground and the weather was back to normal. Bakugo was stunned. Was Deku hiding all his abilities from him? He wanted to run up to the nerd and blast him too. But got a sudden flash of the night 10 years ago, and his anger died down. He sighed and wiped a faint tear that was begging to fall from his eye. Damn it. I am Lord Explosion Murder. Katsuki Bakugo does not cry. Aizawa grew a smirk on his face. He knew that most of the following tests will be next to impossible for Izuku, but he couldn't play favorites, not like the three idiots hiding behind the bushes gawking at their nephew's performance. He showed his result to the class. Shota knew that Izuku hadn't put his all into the test, because he needs his stamina and energy to at least complete all the tests. It's important for us to know our limits. That's the first rational step to figuring out what kind of heroes you'll be. 1,480 meters, are you kidding me? The class shouted in unison. This is awesome, using our quirks as much we want to. The invisible girl cheered. Aizawa shook his head. Awesome, you say. The same thought crossed three teens' minds. Oh boy. You're hoping to become heroes after 3 years here. And you think it'll be all fun and games. How about I make this fun for you? The one with the lowest score across 8 events will be judged hopeless and will be expelled. WHAAAAAA. Aizawa formed the biggest eating gin and ruffled through his own hair. Your fate rests in your hands. Welcome to UA Hero course. It's only the first day. I mean, even if it weren't. It's totally unfair. The same girl from before exclaimed, who Izuku now recognizes as the one who was stuck under the rubble during the entrance exam. She had thanked Izuku and Melissa for saving her during the exam, and introduced herself as Ochako Uraraka. Aizawa ran his fingers through his hair. Natural disasters, highway pileups, rampaging villains, calamity is always around the corner. I'd say Japan is full of unfair things. Heroes are the ones who correct all that unfairness. If you were hoping to spend your evenings hanging out at McDonald's, I am sorry to tell you that for the next 3 years, UA will run you through the ringer. Use your strength to overcome it all. He flicked his index finger. So bring it, plus ultra. Meanwhile, the three hiding were a little worried. After all, Aizawa had expelled his entire class last year. The first exercise was a 50-meter sprint. Izuku was paired with Iida, who instantly activated his engines and bolted across the field, while Izuku just walked through the 50 meters, leaving others dumbfounded. Bakugo obtained a swift 3.15 seconds, while Melissa and Momo received 3.16 and 4 seconds respectively. Second test was grip test. Izuku gained a respectable 81 kgs, while Melissa, 340 kgs, and Momo formed osmium rings and literally broke the machines. The person who managed to get second place was a guy with massive octopus-like arms who obtained 540 using 3 hands to pull the machine. The third exercise, standing long jump, was relatively easy for Izuku, managed to clear it by increasing the air pressure and levitating at the same time. Melissa used a quick burst and jumped off, barely making through. While Momo created a jetpack and swiftly passed through. Students were commenting about the fact that Izuku didn't seem to have any agility, not to mention he looked so stiff. Some thought that the kid wasn't taking the test seriously and depending too much on his quirk, while others were fascinated by the said quirk. When the sidesteps came, Izuku was visibly exhausted. He was just able to do 6 in 30 seconds. While Melissa did 35, Momo 20, and surprisingly Bakugo gained 30 by blasting himself from opposite hands continuously. Izuku was excluded from the ball throw. He obtained the second place with his score as Uraraka just made the ball weightless and tossed it into space, obtaining a freaking infinity. Bakugo stepped into the circle, did a few stretches and die. While others were amazed, Izuku stared in horror as it all came rushing back to him. KK Kachan. Bakugo gained a whopping 705.6 meters while Melissa only managed to obtain a 300 meters score. Momo just made a cannon and obtained a respectable 245 meters. Izuku only managed 10 sit-ups before he became too exhausted, while Kashiko surprisingly gained 90 sit-ups, gaining the second place, with the first being Melissa, who gained 102 sit-ups in the 2-minute time period. The seated toe touch was even worse for Izuku. He placed last, while Kashiko gained the first position, showing her superior flexibility, while second place was taken by the invisible girl. The final test was the long-distance run, the perfect nightmare for Izuku's body. It was 4 kilometers, run, 8 laps around the track, while Momo came first with her rocket shoes, behind Ida and Melissa came on fifth. The lot was done and gathered around Aizawa for results while Izuku was still walking his fourth lap. Melissa had asked him to refrain from pushing himself on the first day, but he was adamant that he can do it and will not accept any special treatment. Izuku had informed Kashiko about his quirk's drawback during their time together. She found it really weird but shrugged it off as a mutation. What really tipped her off was that people were murmuring that he was slacking off and wasn't taking this seriously. Melissa and Momo were about to justify his reasons for being lacking in physically taxing jobs when Kashiko whispered to them, "Let them talk." Izuku wouldn't want his disability shown off like that on the very first day, no less. He did say they needed to earn his trust. Melissa and Momo just sighed and nodded. 20 minutes later, an almost faint Izuku came back to them for final results. Moments later, Aizawa pulled their results in a form of hologram. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Katsuki Bakugo. 3. Melissa Shield. 4. Tenya Iida. 5. Shoto Todoroki. 6. Fumikage Tokiyami. 7. Ashido Mina. 8. Ochako Uraraka. 9. Kashiko Sekigai. 10. Suyu Asui. 11. Shiro Hanta. 12. Mezzo Shoji. 13. Izuku Midoriya. 14. Eijiro Kirishima. 15. Koji Koda. 16. Yuga Aoyama. 17. Rikido Sato. 18. Denki Kaminari. 19. Kyoka Jiro. 20. Masharao Ojiro. 21. Toru Hagakuri. 22. Hitoshi Shinso. Shinso saw his name and prepared himself. "Of course I am last, guess I should go home and begin giving up on my dreams," he sighed and rubbed his darkened eyes. However, fate had other plans. And it was just a rational deception to make you give it all in your tests. No one's going home, work hard and improve yourself in the next 3 years. Now go back to your dorms and rest, you won't be getting much in the foreseeable future. Aizawa said as he walked off the field. Shinso let out a sigh of relief and was internally praising whatever deity had saved him. Editor Kun. Yes, mortal, my superior took pity. Fear us. Izuku had one of his arms around Melissa and was almost limping due to his exhaustion. He wanted to confront the ash blonde-haired boy, but he was too tired for the day. Izuku also found it weird that he didn't singled him out when he used his quirk. For all Bakugo knew, Izuku's quirk makes him glow green. He thought Kacchan would accuse him of looking down on him, or hiding his true powers from him. Izuku was escorted to his room by Melissa, who had a constant faint blush on her face. Izuku noticed it and decided to use her own antics on her. "Hey Melissa Tilda, you can release me now." Melissa's blush severely increased and she instantly let go of Izuku, making him fall and hit the ground. "Oh, sorry, actually no, it was your fault, deal with it. I'll see you tomorrow," she exclaimed as she ran off to her floor, while Izuku picked himself up and got ready to rest for the day. "It's gonna be a great year."